Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
All right. It looks like we're good. Good morning, everybody. We've got a fresh slice of delicious divinations for you. This is going to be episode 19, and we've got a really special guest, Dale Brunsvold. He runs the Rudolf Steiner Audio.com, and I forget how you mentioned it. If you don't run the YouTube channel, but you're a big part of it. You're the voice of Rudolf Steiner, is the best way I can put it. And yeah, well, welcome to the show, man. It's really great having you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
um, so like I said, we should introduce ourselves just a little bit. Like, my name is Todd. I do art, animation, video, podcasting, such. And I'm in Ohio. Kind of have a philosophy, art, and psychedelic background. And I've been digging deep on Steiner for about 3 months now, and it's an incredible resource. It's basically the world would be a much better place if everyone knew some of this guy's lessons. So that's really all I have to say about it. Go ahead, Barry. You want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yep. Yeah. So I guess real name Peter Morse. And let's see, he's born up in New Hampshire, and Saturn was right on the ascendant at the time of birth. So I mean, I'm pretty much a Saturn manifestation with Pluto right there as well. So I came for moral transformation in this realm, and I guess it journeyed me out west in the beginning for the military. I did 6 years in the military in the Air Force, and then that put me back out east. Went through a couple different marriages, and I've had a real neat, I guess, mundane Earth experience. I've had a lot of things that have kind of opened my eyes, and that led me to studying philosophy in school. I got done with philosophy and kind of just tackled experience in life, worked in wildfire. Uh,
You sound like a robot, bro.
that works. Sorry.
Barry, you're breaking up, bro. You're all a robot.
Okay.
Is that because there's a lot of people on?
No, it's probably his connection. He's kind of in the boons.
Oh, I see.
Oh, that's all right. Here, he's back.
Okay. Is that coming in a little bit better?
Yeah, there you go. Sorry, bro.
All right. I'll try to shorten this up here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my bad. So philosophy led into pretty much getting done with that. A lot of mundane work pushed me back out east. I'm in Kentucky now at this point. I'm about 3 years into Steiner, and many intuits like Steiner, but Steiner by far has been just a real catalyst for this point I'm at. I can see why it hit me at this point in my journey right now. Yeah, man, Dale, you're the voice that I fall asleep to every night. Thought I'd just share that with you right away. I always pick out a Steiner, about an hour into it or so, and then you pretty much run in my consciousness, I'd say sometimes till about 1 a.m. So as the voice of Steiner, man, you knock it out of the park. You're such a narrator. It's beyond appreciable. Your ability, even things like coming across German and pronouncing it, just giving this work to the world, all the hours that would go in with reading and whatnot. I mean, it's a real gift, Dale. So thank you much, man. And yeah, Dale, tell us a little bit about yourself. To give us a little background there.
Well, you're so welcome. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, so I guess I'm 64 and was born in North Dakota, Bismarck, North Dakota, and went to college, and I went to college for philosophy, and then after a couple of years, I had some extra math. So I continued to take math, and then got poorer and poorer. So I was able to stay and get both degrees in philosophy and mathematics education. I became a teacher, taught for 37 years, but during that time when I was in college, a guy we were in a graduate course in Wittgenstein, no less, which, by the way, I still don't understand really very well. And he slid Steiner's book, The Philosophy of Freedom, across the conference table at me. I'll never forget that moment. 1978, I think it was. The time is a little slippery, but I think it was 78. And I read that book, and I was absolutely stunned by it. I couldn't believe that it hadn't been in the curriculums of, the philosophy department. I was confused by that. I thought it was incredibly powerful and explained a lot of things. And so anyway, so that was a big, and then when I then read an outline of esoteric science, I went, what? This is by the same guy? I was like, hold on, and I needed that. It really came in the right order for me, that I got this obviously grounded, profound intelligence that wasn't just clever, though, that I ended up finding out was actually a wise man, which was pretty cool, rather than just really being smart, whatever that even means.
Right.
Yeah. So I, have been in study groups for many years. I haven't been the last few years. And that was wonderful to be around people, and we would read Steiner and talk about those ideas. And I participated in some of his mystery dramas. He wrote 4 plays.
Yeah, I got that. Yeah.
They're about 24 or 25 hours to perform all 4 of them.
Wow.
Yeah. They're not normal, but they are really something worthwhile. They're very profound, but they're not easy. He was a type of guy like who somebody said, I'm not here to make you happy. I'm not here to sensationalize, right? This is it. It's all hard work. Nothing is simple anyway, and we want to make it all simple and, have God in our back pocket and be happy for the going. Nah, it's not like that. And I like that too. I like that he laid that out to you. So anyway, I retired about 6 years ago, and I'd been doing the Steiner work since 2005. My main site is www.rudolfsteineraudio.com. And those are all downloadable files. You don't have to give me your email address or all that junk we do now. Hate all that stuff. I think the etiquette is wrong on the internet, but I can understand people wanting to, build groups and have data and all that. But I just like to give it as a free will offering. I got permission from the publishing houses to do that, which I'm very grateful for. And they are steinerbooks.org in America and rudolfsteinerpress.com in England, which have been around for, a long time, 80 years, and publishing Steiner's work. There's about 2/3 of his collected works, I would say, roughly, that are available in English.
Wow.
So of 360 volumes, and that's not the complete works yet, but that's what they have so far done, which is mostly lectures with about 30 or 40 written works in there.
How long do you think till it's done? Like, how many more years do we need?
I won't finish it before I die, so.
Yeah. Jeez, what a work, man.
But anyway, so yeah, that's it. So my wife and I live in Denver, and she's still a school psychologist. She loves working still. I like to play guitar and write a lot of songs, and had to go to an open stage every Wednesday night up here in Denver, and have done that for a long time and have a good time. I'm a big Bob Dylan, Neil Young, John Prine fan. May he rest.
God, yes.
So just been doing that for a long time, and yeah. And I'm very lucky.
Dale, that's all music to my ears, man. Old Man, Neil Young. I mean, my favorite, pretty much all time. So, I'm gonna have to freaking come out there and see you play sometime. You write your own music. That's absolutely beautiful there. Now, on both sides, with I guess writing your own music incorporates on the guitar and with the pen with words, or is it more instrumental? Or tell me a little more there.
Yeah, it's well, most of it is sitting in the backyard with my guitar and a recorder on for a couple of hours, and every once in a while, as maybe in terms of the divination moment, really, something something just streams in. And so I have maybe 8 or 10 songs that are what you would call free stream of consciousness songs that really ended up being songs to my absolute amazement. And so I ended up running in the house, and getting them on the computer and typing up the words and memorizing what came out of me and learning those songs. And when I play those now, and I can't say, they're great songs. I'm not ever comparing myself to the great guys, that's for sure.
Right.
But when I play them again, I remember that moment. I remember that moment of that song occurring in me. And that's really cool experience. That is a cool experience. I recommend that to everybody.
That's
and we
real
all have
art.
Yeah, it really is. That's the whole channeling process, right? I mean, you're channeling in, something was sitting there waiting to come through, and you open the portal and boom, here it is. Holy crap, I got to write this part down. I mean, I'm only a human here. Let me yep, all it's streaming in and you're just sitting there gazing at it. I mean, it's yeah, that's what we try to always do here on this show, let it come through kind of unfiltered. Absolutely. That's awesome, Dale. Yeah, man, I'm gonna get out to Denver and see that happen for sure. So, study groups, you did this for years. Now, it reminds me of going to like a philosophy club and just kind of sitting around, having some drinks and food, and like you said, picking out a topic maybe for the evening, having a reading associated with it, and then everybody comes together to discuss and maybe play the devil's advocate on each side of the issue and whatnot. Was it something like that?
Well, generally, I the ones we have here were based on some people that had started a study group back in the 40s, named Carol Wilson. Her husband was a doctor. So
Okay.
in a way, it evolved from their style. But there are many different study groups. A lot of them, you'll say, well, we're going to do this lecture from this date by Steiner, and a person will present it first. Then they'll do a presentation. We never really did that much here. So what we would usually do was take a little cycle of lectures that Steiner gave, and then we would just start reading it in the group. And sometimes we read the whole lecture and then have a discussion of it afterward. And other times we would try reading a paragraph at a time and stopping and seeing if there were any questions. So we changed it around, but mainly it was text-based.
Yeah. Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
and each like a whole just one paragraph from Steiner's work, you could do a whole evening on on that. I
And
mean,
that's good and bad,
it's so
yeah.
packed in,
Yeah, it's good and bad in a sense, because a lot of people, again, you can't really like listening to the sound of their own voice. And so instead of staying on text, we would tend to wander a lot. So, it had it was never an ideal thing, but it was wonderful to be with the people. It really was.
Yeah, I can't imagine being in a whole group to focus on just one of his subjects. Like, that would just be a real treat for sure.
Well, you should look around. There's anthroposophical study groups everywhere. You may have one, very humbly existing in Ohio, wherever you are. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Do you know
that's a good call. Yeah, absolutely.
.org is the national site, and they have lists of study groups on there. I think there's 200 or 300 listed, and I think Ohio's on there somewhere, but it might be obviously a long way from where you are, or Kentucky.
What was the website again?
I believe it's called anthroposophy.org. That's the national site. But just look up anthroposophy, you'll see it quickly on Google.
Yeah, there's probably, I bet I mean, I'd say it's, there's not tons of them, but they're there, at least.
And you can start your own, just throw it
Yeah.
up on the library, peg wall or whatever, and you'd be surprised, people show up and you get to meet people. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to go to I did something like that. I guess it was some nuns in a monastery kind of opened up just a spiritual talk night, and I remember going to something like that at the monastery, and it was gorgeous, man. Just seeing people with big hearts and just the fellowship, being around people. I mean, in the end, it's not really going to matter if you adopt either a strict Catholic or whatever setting, or I mean, it's just about just sharing the time with people, showing how, I mean, because if you've come to a certain position in yourself in the end, I mean, nothing's going to bother you, right? Like, it's not going to bother you that, there's beings over here that believe this way or that way. It's all content inside of you. And you love that. You look at it in love and you celebrate the differences everywhere. So, yeah, we got to find something like that, Todd. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, this is sort of the modern version, isn't it?
Yes.
Pretty much. Pretty
Yeah.
much. I mean, this is an online, absolutely modern version of it. Every Sunday we're doing this. We try to get different guests on all the time, just get different perspectives sharing. I mean, spirit comes through everybody, so we just try to see, how spirit's out there working, what it's doing, what it has eyes for, what it's feeling, seeing, and absolutely.
There's definitely a lot
Yeah,
to be said, though. To actually be in a group of not digital, with the other physical
physical presence.
presence. So, like, yeah, I think, especially the current climate of things where it's, don't do that. It's like, oh God, well, that's what I want to do now. I want to be around other people. I want to be able to have a stimulating conversation, I guess, um, especially when we're talking about philosophy and such, that's rare these days. So,
It is.
Yeah,
Dale,
absolutely.
I'm dying to know. Um, Let me see here. I really want to know. I mean, all of this work, all of this literature that you've been able to read, digest, and whatnot. I mean, it's been doing a work on that soul, that spirit inside of you. It's been molding and shaping it into something. It's either totally amazingly beautiful, or it's totally undone in a state of unknowing at this point. Tell me, A, when you're reading, are you able to absorb everything as if you were listening? Or, I mean, is it better or worse from the perspective of speaking out loud? And how does speaking out loud, because I know Steiner talks a lot about actually speaking it out loud versus internally just reading. There's quite a difference there. I just want to know where all of this has put you in your state of, I guess, belief, your deepest resonances on, what you think this is, what we are, kind of just where we go from here. I mean, just the nature of time. I mean, I'm just dying to know, like, what has given you, the peace in mind and the happiness in your heart, from this incredible amount of work you've put in. And it's got to be an ultimate curiosity that drives you, right? Like this ultimate state of always being a student that you could almost never hold or digest everything that there is even to a digest just in our little sphere here. So it's like almost a constant state of humbleness. Just tell me more there, if you will.
That was a lot of questions.
yeah.
I,
I know it. Just
it
pick
was,
one.
I love your, it's so beautiful.
Tell me
But
about yourself and the nature of time.
Yeah. Why don't you
Come
just
on,
throw
bro.
space in there?
so, yeah, I mean, so first of all, reading aloud, I recommend it to everyone. Really, you should do that. I mean, I think it's a big part of it. And with Steiner, honestly, you're going to find, especially most of these are lectures anyway, so they were given verbally, that you get taken up by them often. And really, I mean, man, and for me, really, the Christian lectures have always been the Christian cycles, the stuff where he's unfolding the nature of what he called the mystery of Golgotha. To me, he's the greatest preacher. Let's say that. I was
Yeah, I like that.
more what had happened with. I think it was co-opted by a lot of ugly forces, and yet at the same time, it wasn't Christ's fault.
Right.
Kind of thing, right? So I had lost my connection to that, and Steiner gave that back to me, and tenfold. But when I read those often, you can feel even in him that you're touching us kind of a sweet spot in his experiences. Like he said, when he was 40, he'd had this experience of the Christ that he called this great solemn festival of knowledge. That's how he, okay, this solemn festival of knowledge as he stood before the mystery of Golgotha. And maybe we need to unpack that as well. But
Yeah.
And so when you read him, you just find yourself taken up in a little bit into kind of the spirit of his communication, even through translation. I'm going to say that happens. And you can hear that, frankly, and sadly, in some places, you can hear where I am taken up and I lose a certain, objective kind of clarity that I needed to bring to that. And I just went, man, that's how that one worked out. I don't have time to go back to it. You know what I mean?
You're great at rereading. Like when you
Yeah.
notice that your tone and speed didn't accurately reflect the context of what was trying to be stated, you reread it with the proper timing and spacing with your
Sometimes.
voice.
Yeah, not in the early years, but I do more now. Yes, I'm more careful now because people have asked me to be more careful.
Wow.
I didn't know it was going to get bigger. You know what I mean? I thought it was just Dale and his little world, but
Right.
so
Wow,
anyway,
you deserve to
yeah,
be huge, man. You deserve
it's
to like.
bigger. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
My
So
favorite is you translate his humor so well, though. Like you really do.
I translate as what?
His humor.
Ah,
Yeah.
he is. I guess he was quite funny. I mean, I hope you get a chance ever to read a biography of him. He was he was from a simple part of the world and kept a lot of that provincial, uh, stuff. And he said it was a charming man at the same time that when he finally, things grew up around him in quite a massive, rapid way, and people wanted to kind of run the show. No way, you know what I mean? He could be very forceful, and we would say, "Oh, aren't masters just floating off the surface of the earth?" Well, maybe they are in some parts of the world, but if you're in the Western world, if you're in the materialistic, power of Western culture, you've got to have a backbone. You just have to. So people, look at him. He said this, and he was this way here. He's clearly not an initiate. And I go, look, he stepped into the mouth of the dragon. He said that's what his master said, this is really your mission to take a step into materialism and be in grappling with this because it's taking over the world and it's going to separate the world from the spiritual world forever if something is done. And whether Steiner accomplished that, of course, is a big question. But we're wrestling with it right now, right? I mean, whether we're really going to understand, shall we say, how the spiritual world is in a practical way, yet existentially working into the growth of every plant, into the consciousness of every human being, right? And Steiner gave indications that have allowed scientists in physics and horticulture and education and stuff to not necessarily, right, have the direct perceptions of these things yet, but have such working concepts, such rich working hypotheses to take hold of and practice in their education, in their agriculture, right? And they have borne a fruit that is astonishing in the world. Biodynamic agriculture is de facto the greatest in the world. Dr. Hauschka products are all created out of biodynamic principles. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, with the horns, with the bearing of the cattle horn.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But Dr. Hauschka products, you've heard of those, right?
Mhm.
They're like primo pharmaceutical products and face creams and all this stuff. Dr. Hauschka, those were started out of anthroposophy. The guy that did that, Hauschka was his name, I believe, Rudolf Hauschka, started that, and they're some of the best in the world now. And the Veleda pharmaceutical products, all were done by Steiner's work, and a lot of medicines, Iscador, which is a mistletoe-based cancer remedy. So a lot of scientists, PhDs in their fields, work with Steiner's work, which is astonishing when you think about it, really.
It really is. Because it's like on the one light, they want to, at least in his day, there was a lot of bashing. I mean, he was right up against hard-nosed imperialism with, all of your scientific method, which didn't have any room for intuition through, us as an infinite creative being able to access things beyond the world of the five senses. And that was something that he was always defending his position on. And like you said, you got to have a backbone, and boy, you see it. He's a good portion of some of these lectures are either defending a position in anthroposophy, which it looks like, what was the one? Anthroposophy evolved out of, well, he ended up, did he choose that movement because the other movement that Madame Blavatsky was part of, that was getting bad light, or there were false representatives in it? I mean, there was like a big shift in a cult at that time, and it's hard to find the real clear, non-convoluted ones that weren't tied up in some kind of political scene. And anthroposophy, like the work that he puts down right there, is incredible. I mean, and we have anthro, which we have human, and posophy, the study of really the study of the nature of the human. And I think in a lot of his designs and his works in astrology, it's you kind of get the ascending and the descending folding into the descension point of man. So you've got these two worlds kind of collapsing into our world right here. And yeah, I have no idea how deep on the left or right tangents I am right now here, but it's just I like that backbone part because this is a hard field to state something with authority, to state something with fact, and to have confidence in these divinatory areas. I mean, back in the day, these were very high paying positions. The energy of those people were very sought after. These were almost considered, the philosophers aren't prophets. So you've got a separation right there. And however, I think the world of philosophy and its upbringing can lead into a later mature life of very much allowing things to just flow in and being led by a divine intuition. And I think a lot of, if you look at Steiner, I mean, he's like an automatic channeler, writer, speaker. He just lets it come right through. I mean, it's really incredible the fact that we've got 2/3 of it translated into English. And I mean, this is a monster work. I mean, it's like, did this guy ever sleep? I mean,
Yeah.
and I know he did. I know he did because he was balanced and he spoke of it. But like every day, his nature of working hard, that's so true. And his life is the epitome of hard work. It's literally the fruit of somebody who never let any of their time go to waste. Every new day was an opportunity, because Steiner tells us that when we go through our day, we're looking into the future, we're looking out, or we're looking in things about to come out. I'm not 100% sure there, but I know that the day is considered the future. So our waking state is very much considered kind of things to come. So we're forming our seed pretty much here. And I don't know, man. I got such a love for Steiner, man. It's incredible.
I'm loving it.
Yeah, it's
So
I don't
let's
know,
a
man.
little bit about that in terms of where Steiner comes from. So he was an academic and taught in Berlin, mainly at a workers' college the last 7 years before he moved into the theosophical work, as it was called. And
That's
it
it.
was actually a Marxist working college, and yet they hired him. And even when they realized that he wasn't a proper Marxist, they tried to get rid of him, and his students really fought to keep him there, which is kind of cool.
That's
But
awesome.
in the end, he left on his own. But so he'd always had this esoteric experience, and we should talk a little bit about intuition and stuff, because again, Steiner in his work talked a lot about the preparation that one should go through, which is an enormously difficult task. Okay, a knowledge of the higher worlds. I mean, it's a beautiful task, but it's very
Yes.
vigorous. And out of that, intuition would eventually flower. That would be not flashes, but something that you could call upon out of your own inner forces, and
Yep.
it would appear. And that's a little different. Let's say the example I gave of singing a song in the backyard. There
Uh-huh.
I'm kind of going into a little bit of an ecstatic mode because of the music and everything, how much I love music. Honestly, I don't really consider that to be the intuition Steiner talks about. I'm going to say, is a very technical word. So
Okay.
I might mention that once in a while, that when we use the word intuition in anthroposophy, that's not generally the usage of that word in the world.
Okay.
Having flashes, and he's not dismissing those flashes at all, but they're not what
More like a stream, right? Something you can tune into and kind of tap into, right? And
well,
anything you
again,
want.
I would give you my own picture of that. But let's go back real quick. So in 1900, he was asked by this Count Brockdorf, who had a little theosophical group, and Theosophy had been founded in 1875 by Blavatsky and a man named Colonel Alcott, I believe, in New York City. I don't know if you know that, But
Oh,
the
that's neat.
modern occult movement began in the United States. Okay, which is interesting. Okay, so then by 1900, Blavatsky was dead. He never met her, and a woman named Annie Besant, who was an English woman,
Yep.
had become the head of that, and it had gone very, very, very much into kind of an Indian Eastern orientation in the occultism. Okay, and it hadn't begun that way. Steiner argues it was very much an impulse of the Rosicrucians. However conscious Blavatsky was, he revered her in many ways, but at the same time, and that's a long story. We won't go into that. But anyway, when Steiner was asked then, he gave these talks for the first time in his life. Nobody really knew anything about this in his life. It was all private. He kept it private because he knew what the response would be. And so he gave these esoteric talks on September 28th, 1900, which was the beginning, you might say, of his work as a modern occultist or a modern initiate or whatever. And they were, extremely interested in him and asked him to come back. And eventually then by 1902, he was asked to become the general secretary of the German section of the Theosophical Society. And he told them at that time, he said, well, I will do this. He said, but I only will speak out of my own research. I won't be outing the words of Blavatsky or Alcott or Sinnett and some of these other people. It will only be out of my own work. And even that evening when he gave his first official lecture, that night he gave a talk on anthroposophy, as he called it. So from the very beginning, there was this parallelism in a way, right? And as time went on, you can see from the early lectures on that Steiner started to replace the terminology. They used like root races and all this kind of racial picture, right? That got Steiner into trouble with people. But he had to start somewhere, and that's where the Theosophists were at. And he later on very explicitly talks about, well, in the modern age, races have very little to do with it anymore. It's cultural ages. These are cultural ages we've gone through, cultural epochs. And that's really what was happening there. And yes, there was a race, shall we say, that had the vanguard impulse for that, part of world evolution, give or, whatever you want to call it. And those have changed hands over the course of the millennia. So then finally, Steiner had talked a lot in 1909. He started talking about the nature of the Christ being in a way that was very direct and didn't fit into theosophy anymore. Here he was still the head of it. And this was, they were probably seeing this in the big society, the world society, going, what? And I'm going to speak out of my own opinion here, that they came up with Krishnamurti. They came up with this guy, Alcyone, that they found in India, and they proclaimed Krishnamurti at that time to be the reincarnation of Christ.
Wow.
Did you know this?
I didn't
know this story?
know. This was early 1900s?
Yeah, but probably 1909, 1910. And here I don't know how much this was. We've got to, Steiner was building the society in Germany very rapidly. I mean, obviously, when people met him and heard him speak, they could, if you had a faint interest in this stuff, you knew you'd found the mother lode. I mean, there was no question about it. And so people were just flocking in a way. I'm going to overstate it maybe a little bit, but flocking to him. And meanwhile, the Theosophical Society was becoming a little strange to the West, right? Adyar and all this Indian terminology, and people were probably less interested in that. You might say, I don't know, but it was still huge, especially in Britain. So they were, say yes. And so Steiner was, quite upset about this because from his direct spiritual experience, he knew that this was a bald-faced lie, and or it was an erroneous clairvoyant experience by the people involved. Right? That's probably a better put it. Who knows? And so he was very direct about it, and he wrote he didn't, but the people around him wrote a letter to Annie Besant in the Theosophical Society saying how wrong this was. And Steiner and all of his group were expelled from the Theosophical Society. But Steiner entered into this. He didn't enter into, people say, well, Steiner wrote that letter. He did not. This was written by the kind of the
peers.
Board, the board of the Theosophical Society of Germany and all the people that were on his, committees and all that stuff. I don't know the organization details, but, so around 1912 then, with all the people that left with him, or got expelled with him, he established then what he called the Anthroposophical Society. And but anyway, just so you know that a little bit of that story, and I hope it's not too one-sided there, because I am.
No, I love it, Dale. I love it.
And there's a set of lectures on. Well, let's see, where is that? It would probably be. There's too many books on it to try to pick any particular one. There is one though. The grandson of the composer Sergei O. Prokofiev, whose name is Sergei O. Prokofiev, was the president of the Russian Anthroposophical Society, and became a member of the committee, the big committee in Dornach, Switzerland, the Vorstand, as it's called. And he wrote a book called The East and the Light of the West. And in there, he goes into the kind of interesting thing. It's kind of the spiritual materialism of some of the main occult streams. I don't want to step on anybody's toes here, but the Agni Yoga of the Roriks, what happened with that, Theosophy. Steiner talks about the occult imprisonment of Blavatsky in his lectures
Walked
from
into fire Aries.
Yeah. And he goes into this, and it's pretty intense in there. So he gives a lot of the picture of the struggles that are going on and are still going on in the kind of what spiritual stream is going to rise and be a true one that people.
Right.
Steiner made anthroposophy a really demanding thing, because he said if you don't really do these exercises carefully and work on your equanimity, on your goodwill, on cleansing really your soul of a lot of dirt and crud, that when you rise into the higher worlds, you experience them in a distorted form. You just start going, right? And so he knew that in this incredible clarity that he had, I think, right? And so he gave these exercises as very rigorous mental and concentration exercises that if you accomplish them successfully, he says you're guaranteeing then that your stepping into the spiritual world will be on solid ground. And that is always was something I went, yeah, I'm not going to take chances with this. I've seen too many, crazy people in the world. It's a lot of people their minds with this stuff very easily, and I'm not picking on them. You know what I mean? They just, and really, we had our own drug experiences, right, in those early years, and that's exactly the wrong thing. And I think hopefully most of us realize that now, except we're grateful that considering the deep materialism we were raised in, something to break us out of it, so to speak. You know what I mean? I mean, it was a difficult thing, but I think it was a deep wounding too, to be honest with you. I think that there's a wound there we have to acknowledge that has to be cared for, that we did that to ourselves and open those doors maybe before they should have been open. But maybe it just I don't have an answer for that. I'm talking too much. I'll shut up again.
No, you're good. I want to get in, if we can, let's get in one of the biggest mysteries, and one of the, the overall arching themes through Steiner's work is the mystery of Golgotha. And I love this mystery right here because it speaks to, our direct system that our center is pretty much from as light. And it gives us a pathway on as light, what we're responsible for, and where we come from and where we go in terms of the Golgotha system. And I see the story of the skull and the Christ, as the light inside. And it's made me end up coming to a point where my own physical body is a gateway, and there's certain things that you can do to your body, do with your body, and experience with your body that can kind of align with these principles, I think, and give you access to the full operations of what you are as light, pretty much. And just tell me real quick, well, not real quick, Dale, drag it out, please. Give me some detail, but get into how you've taken the mystery of Golgotha through Steiner's work and what it's done for you, or what you've gotten out of that part.
Well, we would need to begin with what's the picture of the human being that Steiner says is a more accurate, complete picture of the human being. Because without that, there's really, like when you say body, I'm reminded of this. So with Steiner, right, we really have these four basic bodies that each human being has. Now, how are you guys on that, those concepts?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like the four. I see the cross, and then I see the four essential principles as the
What are those?
one with the three. You have the rising sun, the culminating sun, and the setting sun, and then you have the point of inertia or singularity as the thing that is doing those three things. So it's like a one that is having an aspect of the Trinity, which would be essentially the physical, then it would be the mental body, and then it would be the feeling body. Or and there's a lot of, I think, descriptors in those three. I know that the West position, the setting would be the intellect position, the mind position, the culminating position, the high noon above on the 10th house, way above the very top position would be the sense or feeling position, the consciousness, the waking consciousness. And then the rising position would be the physical action position right there. So yeah, tell me what you think they're
Well,
on the
let's
four
use
bodies
Steiner's
there.
terminology. Let's use Steiner's terminology, if
Go
that's
ahead.
okay.
Yeah, and I'm horrible with that part,
And
so
I'm
you
not
can
very good at
definitely help.
astrology, to be honest with you, right? So I'm just not, I've never really delved into it, unfortunately. But so Steiner then very carefully in the third chapter of An Outline of Esoteric Science, he talks about, I found it just stunning, to be honest with you. Here he says, look, you've got the mineral kingdom, and you've got the plant kingdom, and you've got the animal kingdom. And in each one of those kingdoms, there's a set of forces from the cosmos that has penetrated into those beings and caused them to manifest in the way that they do. Well, this was, this was quite stunning to me. So, and we human beings, of course, have these three bodies that manifest in a distinct way in the mineral, plant, and animal kingdoms. We have those bodies too, but in a human way, which is a far more developed way. And then we have this fourth body, we could say, in ourselves, which is this eternal reincarnating individuality. So let's just talk about those for a second. So we look at the mineral kingdom, we see all the mineral substance. Sure enough, I look at my body, and that's the body that's the word we hear the materialism of our day talk about, which is, yeah, you're a body. And that's it. They're done. Well, he said, oh, no, we just begun. And that is the mineral substance here is from the mineral kingdom. And he says, as human beings, if we really understand that in its deepest spiritual significance, we really would bow in reverence and gratitude to the mineral kingdom.
We would.
Foundation.
It gives life to the plant and then to the animal. Yeah, it sustains.
And then he's, well, what's happened in the plant kingdom? Well, in the plant kingdom, you have a set of what are called life forces that have been able to penetrate matter and raise it to a higher organization. And I'm, by the way, only giving this from one perspective this time. And so in the plant realm, you have a second set of forces, the etheric world, the etheric forces. He called them the body of formative forces. And so when we look at our body, sure enough, my cells are decaying and falling off me at 100,000 every minute. The cells, most of the dust in your house is your own body cells, right? And so my body is constantly decaying. My body is constantly falling apart. And at death, we see that process continue. And sure enough, I do go to dust. I'm going to dust right now. But what's happening is these etheric forces, this body of formative forces, is interpenetrating my physical body and constantly working in its profoundly intelligent way to rebuild the organism that's constantly dying. Okay? You guys still there?
Yep.
Yes,
okay.
sir.
So this,
I'm following. I'm just over here drooling, Dale. Keep going.
Okay. So this etheric body in the plant realm. So what happens? So in kind of this Plato's analogy of the cave, right? Modern science stares down into the shadows on the cave wall, and they're profound shadows, and they're full of relationships to learn. Science is science, right? And it sees the cells dividing, and it sees the fluids and the various things. It goes, wow, that's life. And Steiner would go, no, that's not life. That's what life does. The spiritual activity of life, when it penetrates matter, it creates this. What you're seeing is the results of life in matter, but you're not seeing life itself. You need organs of perception to see life itself. And we're going to get back to that in a second, okay? If you don't have organs of perception to see life, you're not going to see it. So what organs of perception do you use? You use your physical ones, and your physical ones are going to see only the physical world. So they're going to use microscopes and, and everything to see the activity that life creates in matter. Is that clear to you now?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, that's crystal.
So here we are. So now we have two bodies. Well, then he goes, well, what's happening? Well, let's look at the animal realm. Well, what's happened there? Well, now we have another set of forces. He called them the forces, the consciousness forces. And he does use the word astral body, but again, that's got a lot of baggage and sounds flaky.
Right.
But he did use that word because it's an easy word. But we'll call them consciousness forces for a while. They penetrate matter and life and raise it to another higher level. It separates from the earth, right? Plants are tied to the earth. Animals are separated. And it fills that animal with passions and instincts and drives and desires and sentience. It has organs of perception now that it relates to this sentience that it's experienced. And it runs around searching for food and reproduction and whatever other profound, really they are, right? Profound experiences that animals are having that we can't imagine. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have this body of consciousness in us. Probably in us, most of it is still subconscious. Well, and whatever we can bring into consciousness with our fourth body, which we'll get to.
And this is the desire area, right? That we try to overcome with the body of the will.
Later, right,
well, overcome's a strong word, but
yeah. So this astral body is our sentience, is our awareness at a basic level, okay? But it also carries the three great soul forces that you kind of referred to earlier that I thought Steiner just typified so nicely. We have fancy words in modern psychology for them. But he said, your soul life, your astral body, your soul life has thinking, feeling, and willing. Those are the three things you use in the world. And I thought, why do we use affective and all these, and volitional and all these? They're such rich words. Let's go back to the etheric body. Also in our etheric body, not in animals necessarily. Well, we can't say that. We can't forget that. In our etheric body, we carry all our memories of all our life from the moment we're born till the moment we die. That's in our etheric body, this life body that we have. And when we have memories, we kind of pull out from that etheric body. And because of the nature of evolution in our time, we're not able to access it directly. We have to access it through how it reflects in our physical body. And when we do, we really get corpses of those memories. Really like vague images, vague shadows. Some people better than others, right? Some people have amazing memories compared to others when it comes to their own lives and experiences. So I want to mention these bodies are incredibly rich and complex. And what's the nature of karma in your etheric body? What's the nature of karma in your astral body? So Steiner goes into all the details of this, right? So we've got these three bodies. These are the three friends, you might say.
Hold on real quick. The life body and the plant body and the etheric body, those are all the same, right?
They're the same, except the human etheric body is far, far more developed than the plant etheric body is.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
okay.
It's human, and that's I'm giving this whole evolution from one side, and actually there's a spiritual side that's that kind of gives Darwin his other side, so to say. You might say.
Okay.
So in these three bodies, we have the reincarnation of the human individuality, right? You, me, and Todd, etc. Right? And what happens there is that ego in the spiritual world enters into these three bodies, and I'm going to give my description of this as I've always, worked it out. And what happens is from my physical sense perceptions, I received this data all the time flooding into me, right? My organs, my seeing, and actually there's 12 senses, by the way, Steiner talks about, not 5. And they're flooding into me. But then from the other side, in order to build the world that I experience in my consciousness, as he talks about in the philosophy of freedom, I have to have an active mind life, an active thinking life that takes a hold of these perceptions that I'm getting from my physical senses and building my world with them, okay, that I experience as chairs and trees and etc. Right? All that stuff is not a passive process. It's a very active process. In the middle between those two the soul of Dale Brunsvold comes into existence from the time of birth until around 21. Steiner says you're actually really born. And that, in a way, is that ego that I am in the spiritual world that is really never does come down here, by the way, and isn't named Dale, right? And this physical body that I've been given by heredity, their collision creates a soul that lives this one time on the earth. And it gathers its experiences. Meanwhile, the karma from your past lives gradually enters into those experiences because it's been brought along during your incarnation. And whatever you learn in your culture brings new karma that you can grow with. As you mentioned, every day in your waking consciousness is your future. Beautiful. The seed you're creating for the future. So we have moon karma that comes from the past. We have sun karma that we're creating for the future all the time, right, in this thing. So, guys, this is the human being. When we talk about body, that's the picture in my mind. Those four bodies.
Yeah, that's all the bodies making
Otherwise,
one body.
Yep. Just going to fall back and, so here's the thing. And I love this. It came to me maybe 10, 15 years ago. Every body we have has organs of perception in it.
Mm-hmm.
But right now we're only in our phase of evolution. The organs of perception in our etheric body and the organs of perception by and large in our astral body are dormant. And that's because of the need for evolution. We needed to separate ourselves completely from the spiritual world in order for freedom and then love to arise out of us, not just pour into the world.
That's
not
because you got to be the love.
Right. Be the love. Yeah. Be the rain, as Neil Young says. Right. So we have the physical organs of perception. We use them. We think, hey, that's the only real world. I mean, that's how sad our picture is now, right?
Right.
All those poor superstitious people thousands of years ago, they thought this and they thought that. We now know, and I'm like, okay, I can't go there. And then here's the fun one. Here's the fun one. What is, I'm going to ask this for fun. What is the organ? Dale, you just said every body has organs of perception. Well, what about the ego, the self, the I that you're talking about? That is this reincarnating aspect of us. What are its organs of perception?
That's a crazy question, Dale.
That is. What do you think they are? I mean, you're going to like the answer, I think, if you think about it.
Does it have to do with time as an organ itself, or are we talking about a potential physical organ in the body that would relate to an organ in the ego?
Okay,
I would say if it's the eye, it's going to have to do with the spine, and it's something to do with that center post, that eye beam right there, and how you see yourself. It would be up in the brain, probably in the, I don't know. You're going to have to take me from there, Dale.
Well, that's the reflecting apparatus. But the essence of the organ of perception of the I or ego, get this now, is thinking.
Ooh.
Thinking sees a world of concepts. Some of them are completely, shall we say, non-earthly, and then many of them are the mental pictures that over time you're building. That's right. So this seeing of concepts takes the percepts from the physical world, the concepts that thinking sees, and puts them together into units or of the knowledge of the world that you and I experience.
And that's con is with, and sept is 7, so that's with 7, and it's almost like the 7 rays coming out, of the head, coloring everything.
Nice, yeah. And because of our nature right now, and we don't experience thinking in the etheric body where it actually resides. By the way, that's another thing that's there. We can only experience its reflection, but we use an instrument in our physical body to experience the corpses of that life of thinking that lives in us, and that is our brain.
Oh, wow.
So people, now here's an interesting thing. Steiner says, causally, we misunderstand the brain. We think the brain is producing thinking, when in fact it's the ego or the I, the will force in it, that takes from its activity in the brain the ability to see consciousness on the physical plane. Until we've developed ourselves enough where we don't have to use the brain. He called it brain-free thinking, where you can finally use the etheric body itself, which, by the way, was done in the Egyptian times and was done in the past. They thought with they thought with the etheric body, they didn't even think the brain was anything, right? They thought the liver was the center of consciousness, right? They just pulled the brain out of the nose when they mummified people because the brain was just a useless organ to the Egyptians. Did you know that?
And that would make a lot of sense too, because the liver filters everything. And if you think about that, I mean, when you have everything go through you, you're picking, choosing, pulling, grabbing certain things, filtering it. And obviously with the blood, in astrology, Jupiter rules over the blood, which contains all the knowledge, which would be connected to that etheric body of life. And it's obviously neat too that the human life body, etheric body, is the same shape, the hemoglobin, as the chlorophyll is in the plant.
Very.
Probably, that hex pattern.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah.
So Dale, you were talking earlier about having a difference between like intuition and what I would call like activated memory whenever you were like playing a song. And where I'm currently at, it's talking about how like the planes rise, and you were talking about the animal and the plant kingdom, and how there's different bodies and different vehicles working through those planes to get up to the higher one, like where the spiritual realm is. So I kind of wanted to hear the rest of your thoughts on what you consider difference between intuition then and activated memory, where you hear a song, you hear a stimulus or a vibration, and that allows you to recant, a previous dead corpse, as you call it, from the past. I wanted to know why, like, how you differentiate intuition from that.
Yeah,
Great question, Ben.
Yeah, that is a great question. Yeah. So what do we have now? So we have this human being that has these three bodies, and Steiner says, let's do that real quick, just because it helps with the flesh out the picture. So from 0 to 7 years old, this happened in 7-year rhythms, and from 0 to 7 years old, you probably read this before, right? Is really the time when you've come out of your mother, and all of your substances are the substances of your parents. So this body out here is still completely connected to the etheric body of your mother, as a matter of fact.
Yep. Moon forces first 7 years.
Right. Yep. Moon forces. And so during those 7 years, your etheric body stays, Steiner describes it as sheathed, like a sword inside a sheath kind of thing, right? And all it wants to do is replace all the substances that it got from the parents out of its own activity and create the human being as one step into independence, okay, where its body is made of its own substances, shall we say, right? Mm-hmm. And so what happens is, though, in modern times, is we go in and interfere with that process far too often. And one of the ways we do that is we try to access the thinking processes, not knowing they're in this etheric body, and pull them out and create abstraction in the child as fast as possible. Get it smart in our understanding of the word, right? And so that is what you're doing, is you're robbing the etheric body of the forces that it would otherwise be using to build a really good blueprint for its entire lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Okay? And this is tied with the teeth too. Your second set of teeth.
That's where I was going to get to. So the last thing, when you finally can start to access those etheric forces, is when the body gets rid of the last remaining substances from the parents, which are the hardest substances, which are the teeth. So in Waldorf schools, in Waldorf education, in an anthroposophical understanding of the human being, the second dentition is a momentous time in the evolution of the human being, right around the 7-year period, right? And before that time, the child is a creature of imitation. And when Steiner uses that word, he uses it with love and reverence and awe, that a child's ability to imitate is God-given and profound, okay? And it listens to a child when it's first born can speak all 12 T's of the Sanskrit. You know what I mean?
Wow.
There's 12 T pronunciations, right, in Sanskrit, right? So it has all that there. And he would say, even speaking to your child sloppily is injurious. It's going to hurt the child. Now, that's just karma in our world, right? But just people to say what you got in front of you is soaking up. It's a physical sense organ, the whole thing. It has no mediator of a soul yet. It's just sucking up. Okay. And then gradually we see that, come into being more and more at 3 years old and that kind of thing. So anyway, there's a second dentition. Steiner says the etheric body unsheathes. And I remember him somewhere saying, clairvoyant even sees how part of the etheric body seems to separate off around the head. And the consciousness of the child metamorphoses. It doesn't just grow into a different one. It transforms. And I use the phrase kind of into a pictorially, morally saturated consciousness. Remember how from 7 to like 9 or 10, how you could tell a person a story and how absorbed you were in the damsel in distress and the hero that would save her, and how affected we were at that time, how enormous the images were in our consciousness. They just shocked us. They were so intense. Now we see them on a dead television screen, and that's the best we can do. But in a child, don't show him that, because his are far better than that high-res television is ever going to be able to give him. Okay, tell him the story, read him the story.
Crazy picture.
And so for those 7 years, from 7 to 14, Steiner said, were really the sweetest time for education. But what you needed to do was take all the abstractions you had and like a glove inside out. You had to turn them into story. You had to encode what you wanted the child to learn into story, so that you didn't pull the child out of its form of consciousness that it now has. And again, damage the child, which we really do well now. Okay.
Yeah.
And so how do you do that? I mean, those guys work their asses off. If you want to talk to a Waldorf teacher, it's astonishing, because of the deadness of the culture they live in, how to come up with how to do this well. And it's a heavy training, heavier in Europe than it is here, by the way. So then at around 14, the astral body, the body of the ascension forces, it unsheathes, and it's already beginning. And then your consciousness radically transforms again, and we call it formal operations thinking, or things like that. Right? There's a separation from the world, where at the same time a new kind of thinking takes over that allows you to penetrate into the world in an objective way far more deeply than you did before. So it's interesting how separations cause also a bridging or deepening of your penetration into the world. So here we have another 7-year period, 0 to 7, 7 to 14, puberty now, and then 14 to 21. And at 21, Steiner says that the ego that you've been building, this soul life, this Dale Brunsvold life, really finally is able to seat itself in these 3 bodies, which have become independent finally, and begin its work on the earth. So you're really born around 21. And it's called, the phrase used to be coming of age, right? That's what we used to say people were at 21. Oh, you've come of age, right? And then what happens? Now we're to the question that you had, Todd. Honestly, I know these answers are so far afield, but we don't have this preparation. Otherwise, it just sounds like cheap psychology, in my opinion.
Right.
Work is richer. It's richer. Okay. So what happens? So the minute, let's say, I'll dramatize it. The minute that the ego finally finds itself in these 3 bodies, going, oh wow, like Job in the 3 friends, right? It turns on the astral body. This ego, which is filled with the moral substances of the higher hierarchies, it turns on it and begins to try to purify its passions and instincts and desires. And for the next 7-year period, from 21 to 28, Steiner calls it the sentient soul period. The ego works into that through others, through the meeting of other people in the world. Now you move out into the world from your education and graduation and all that stuff, and you meet your fellow human beings and your work and all that stuff. And in that, you try to purify elements of your astral as much as you possibly can, given your karma, given the circumstances of life around you, the culture you're in, and whatever, lots of variables. And whatever parts you can transform, those are eternities. Those are eternal aspects that are carried by you forever. Okay. Yep. Even though the ego Dale's going to be gone in 80 years or so. I hope I get more of it. Maybe I won't. Okay. Then at around 28, that ego tries to go into the etheric body and try to transform it, which is like Steiner says, it's like working with the hour hand of a clock as opposed to the minute hand of the clock that the astral body is like. Kind of a cool picture.
Yeah, it is a good one.
So you work in that realm, and it's far harder. And he says, for instance, a religious life, some kind of life where you can enter into deep worship and deep reverence on a rhythmic basis, is a very profound way to begin working on your etheric body. But how much of it we get done in this stage of evolution is a question, is a big question. And then finally, from 35 to 42, we enter into even trying to transform our physical body itself. Okay. Now, this is, very
This is
far.
what I've been doing. That's crazy. I'm 38.
Yeah. And we even call that, right, the midlife crisis. We call that the time of existential crisis, where people feel death. They reevaluate because
Yep.
they're touching their physical body. They're touching the death body that you have, right? The body
Yep.
that's always dying. Your physical body, guys, is always dying. It's your life
Yeah.
body constantly fights and replaces those 100,000 cells a minute that you're losing.
That's
You're
crazy.
shedding your body like you wouldn't believe. If we had the right camera and we could time lapse that puppy, you'd be amazed. You're just a flowing river. There's nothing here that's permanent at all, right?
That's right.
What do you think about it? Okay.
Yeah, you
So
can never step in the same river twice, I
that's
think.
wonderful. Heraclitus was saying something else, wasn't he? One of the great occultists of all time, right?
Right.
But of course, they talked about these bodies. They talked about the earth of the physical, the water of the etheric, the air of the astral, and the fire of the ego. So the four elements were never the mundane, reductionist, sarcastic picture condescending picture that we're given in our modern time, which, by the way, is the height of conceit. We are the most
the dirty elements,
arrogant,
the
right?
lower realms.
Those were all mystery. That's all mystery language. All of that is mystery language. And Steiner revives all that in his writings, in my opinion. So the point is when we eventually work on ourselves through the anthroposophical exercises and knowledge of the higher worlds, the astral body will yield up a form of imagination. Now, this is the other side of our culture. Steiner says that imagination is a faculty in us that we disregard by and large. I mean, we see it in the great artists. We do see it in all the movies made and all these things. But in each individuality, the imagination is a faculty that is just disregarded in us. And if it were properly trained, Steiner argues that you would acquire a form of subjectivity that is objective. You would have an objective subjectivity, a sensorially exact fantasy. I'll say that again, a sensorially exact fantasy. Isn't that a cool idea?
That's awesome.
And out of that, you would be able to understand the way plants are growing, the way they're growing, in such a way that you could even imagine a plant that doesn't exist on the earth and lawfully unfold it from seed to flower, and get it in your imagination. It would be real, except that it wouldn't exist on the physical plane. Interesting.
That really explains the way I see the world right there. I mean, that's 100%.
That Steiner called it imagination. Then, in the elements of your inspiration, your transformed etheric body, you would be able to begin to hear. He used the word hear because inspire, hear. You'd be able to hear the activities and understand the world of the hierarchies, but like in a listening way. The angels, archangels, archai, exousiai, dunamis, kyriatetes, seraphim, cherubim. Okay, all these beings, these 9 hierarchies, which is another conversation, right? That are active in our world all the time, growing our plant, working with our plants and stuff. And then you've got the elementals doing their deeds, as it were. But so this inspiration is something that you would be able to access out of a clear day awake consciousness. And only when you finally went into the physical with this form of consciousness that you've developed through these exercises and really gone through stages of initiation to get there, you would then, Steiner says, be able to meet the higher worlds. You would meet the higher beings. Okay. And he called that intuition, Todd. Okay.
Right.
So these things are not something that happen to you. They are trainings in your life of soul that you then can exercise like you do your sense organs right now when you read a book.
Yeah.
It's a very different picture, guys, from what, shall we say, the new age wants to imagine to be intuitions. Now, I'm not dismissing that because Steiner says you will have intuitions in your life even though you're not developed. And he doesn't dismiss them, but he doesn't claim that they're spiritual science, which is the other name for anthroposophy, right? They're not spiritual science. So you have to be careful of what happens with them, because, and think of it, all you have friends, I have friends that are led astray by falling in love with their subjectivity.
Yeah.
Not their
Yeah.
objective subjectivity, but their subjective subjectivity, right? And that's never good. That's just never good, right? So there's grace, there's prayer, there's that hallowedness that we have to carry with us when we want to search these things, because egotism, that little sucker, is always around the corner wanting to pull us into some grand, self-aggrandizement, however much we think we're humble. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That
I know.
gamut there, guys. You know what I mean?
I know it.
And
It's
so
so
I'm
true,
really,
Dale.
and so I love that you're talking about these things, but I'll tell you that I'm very reserved about it. I'm a very cautious person, and maybe I'm just scared, a coward. It could just be that I'm a damn coward. I mean, let's maybe be
I
more.
love it. You
And
got
No.
it in there though. It wants to come out, you know. I
it
mean,
does. It's in fact the
in a
world.
way you formed your own ego. You
The
formed
world
this
lost.
own fire stick.
Now, see what we're talking about. That's funny that you were saying about like
Hey, wait,
sound and everything.
wait, 1 sec. Hey, let me introduce Brad, or Ben, so that Dale can know him. Real quick. So Brad's been on our channel. He joins our show once in a while. He's super spiritual, super old soul, in Pennsylvania, and great guy. I met him a couple months ago. So go ahead. There you go. Go ahead.
Oh,
Yep.
thank you,
Ben.
Todd. Nice to meet you, Dale. What's up,
Nice
Barry?
to you.
Hey, what's up, bro?
So all this is going on. I'm reading a book from J.D. Buck. It's Mystic Masonry and the Symbols of Mystery, the Mysteries of the Greater Antiquity. And right now, right where I'm at, it's talking about like the voices and these chords. Whenever you say that we have subjectively subjective friends living like that, it's like where your etheric or astral body is at, and the dominant chord, the dominant like main theme of where you're at. And I just felt to share about it because it talks about, you know, the master who knows this, the master who you know, in Steiner's realm, completes that they're able to pronounce the ineffable name of God, which is the word, which, you know, comes to where, you know, Christ said, "It is finished," because your words build your reality as us as speaking beings build the reality around us, in my opinion. So I wanted to share something, as you were saying, about how you get to hear the different levels of like cherubim and dominions and things like that. So if everyone's okay, it says, the voice of the silence says, "Before thou setst thy foot upon the ladder's upper rung, the ladder of the mystic sounds, thou hast to hear the voice of thy inner God, which is the higher self, in 7 manners. It is first like the nightingale's sweet voice chanting a song of parting to its mate. The second comes as the sound of a silver cymbal of the Dionysus awakening the twinkling stars. The next is as the plaint melodious of the ocean sprite imprisoned in a shell, and this is followed by the chant of Vina. The fifth, like the sound of bamboo flute, shrills in thine ear. It changes next to a trumpet blast. The last vibrates like the dull rumbling of a thundercloud. The seventh swallows all the other sounds. They die and then are heard no more. When the 6 are slain and at the master's feet are laid, then is the pupil merged into the one, becomes the one, and lives therein."
Ooh, that's beautiful. Story of the plant right there.
So
Yep.
what is this book again?
It's by J.D. Buck. It's Mystic Masonry, or the Symbols of Freemasonry and the Greater Mysteries of Antiquity.
Interesting. You know, really sounded very Zarathustrian. I don't know if you've read the 14 Seals or not, but some of it in there really does remind me of.
I have not read them, but he does reference. I don't think he's referenced Steiner. He's referenced Blavatsky, so I want to say that he would have, because it's just taking a bunch of different things. But I put it in the chat there. We were talking about
Very beautiful. Very beautiful.
how things come down, and he does reference Zoroaster. And there's actually a model of how like science and religion have actually had to play on each other, and they're all equally balanced. As when maybe Steiner came up, you know, you were saying, "Oh, I'm sorry."
Zarathustra and Zoroaster are the same. You know that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So he does
Yeah.
reference it. Okay. So yeah, some of that
Yes.
was 14 Seals in a way. So, which is very interesting when we get back to the mystery of Golgotha, which somebody asked about. But continue.
Yeah,
Continue.
that was
Yeah, that was me. Yep. So, yeah, I was just saying that that's pretty much all I had for right now.
It reminds me of the sine wave, like the discovery of the very beginning of that was the kind of that you have to be able to hear something, so you're aligning with something that's out there already, and or in there, whatever you want to place there. And then it kind of starts to unlock things, and it keeps knocking and keeps going deeper and deeper until it discovers its own self inside, and then its own self inside, it starts to, the noise starts to get louder, the sound, when you have something that's unfolding from the unseen world of light into the slower dense body of sound, where it's going to get a sound body, as it approaches its body, it's going to get louder and louder and louder until the moment or the epoch where silence occurs, and you get that shoot or that spring into oneness. So when that seed pops, when everything is sealed in, when all the necessary ingredients have formed and everything is present, and then we're going to pull and go into the center, and then we're going to all come together as one into oneness for the seven. It very much speaks to the nature, that growth cycle. Steiner had a lot of cutouts of the process on the wheel of the 7 different stages aligned with the planets, and how it pretty much shows all the different fruit and vegetation patterns if you were to do cross sections of the seed and the toral field around it, essentially. And it had the 12 o'clock position, the high noon position, empty with no circle and no anything, which is always what we call our day, or the future, or the sun side, where the arc is, and it's really where the curved lines are versus the straight lines. So we're off into the future, into the woman, into the image, into the seen, into the visible, and that which is seen is not permanent necessarily. The image is something that can be changed and distorted. I mean, all illusion in a mirror can be reflected differently and still be an image, essentially. So it's not losing any properties of truth. It's just a sense of reflection. And there's only 2 things that can really play with light: a mirror or a crystal ball. So I mean, that's what we got: smoke and mirrors. I mean, you've got the moon as the mirror, and then you've got the Christ doll, which is the crystal. And I think the story, of Golgotha, the reflection, is our moon, and then the actual crystal is our sun. And it would align with black sun theories. It would align with this emittance, and then everything that is reflected, which we call our sun in the sky, would really be a type of moon, a type of thing reflecting light. And then it just so happens, everything is reflecting light, and we are the ones absorbing it. As beings, essentially, we're all black holes absorbing light, and that's how the reality gets created around you. You're essentially a black hole, which is a pole. And sulfur, it all aligns with the inert gas that absorbs things, and you're dancing gas around a pole, essentially, with many other things. Dale, how would Steiner react to today's society with what we have going on with vaccinations? He was probably dealing with a similar thing almost there back with some different flus and whatnot. Do you think he would be speaking out against these things in acts of free choice, or what do you think his stance would be there? Would he see this as an attack or a threat, or would he align with it? I mean, what do you think? I know that's a tough one.
It is a tough one. He did. First of all, he didn't know about viruses then. The viruses had not yet been discovered in Steiner's. They knew about bacteria, of course, but not viruses, for one thing. But
not viral theory.
Yeah, but he did talk about at times the danger of vaccines in the wrong hands, in terms of an occult corruption that could happen, that would cause people, when they were born, and I'm just going to say what he said then, but he said many different things. So this isn't what he said. This is one of the things he said, that there could be a danger that in the future, children could be given a vaccine at birth that would somehow blot out any orientation to the spiritual world as they got older.
Oh, see, and that's
already happened, to be honest with you.
I
But
just
he
shared an
also,
image I found about that. It's actually just what you're talking about.
yeah,
It says,
well, I'll just
in the future, we
talk
will
about,
eliminate the soul with medicine under the pretext of a healthy point of view. There will be a vaccine which the human body will be treated as soon as possible directly at birth so that the human being cannot develop the thought of the existence of soul and spirit. And it goes on.
but really that's already happening anyway. So
Right.
I think the vaccine, frankly, is kind of redundant,
Yeah.
sadly enough, unless they gave it to us 40, 50 years ago. You know what I mean? So that, you
Right.
know, but in many, many other places, he talked about, you know, that fanaticism was simply not helpful in these things. Okay. And I'm not. I mean, I'm extremely aware of my own ignorance, and I do not have a PhD in speculation. So,
Mhm.
you know, I'm just not one of those kind of people, and I'm not claiming anything here. I'm not claiming I'm right or wrong, but for
Sure.
me, given the circumstances of the time, I don't normally get vaccines. I got one because I just simply don't know, and I wanted to protect my family and friends. Okay, and
Right. Right.
if I lose my freedom or something from it, then I'll pay for it that way, because you know, how free are we anyway? I mean, in some ways,
Right.
let's get really honest there. You know, so you know, I can understand the reactions of people in some ways, but I can't in other ways as well. And I, you know, I hope we don't have to continue. Maybe, I mean, if you guys want to share on that, but it's
Sure.
not a helpful discussion, and I don't have anything to
Yeah.
say about it. I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
know.
I hear
Extremely
you.
clear about my own ignorance. I
It's
really,
just it's such a big thing in this world, and I think one of the main problems is, of course, the media and what we're presented with, and
and the social
it's
media
just
even more so. I think the social media
yeah,
is driving everybody insane. You know, so I don't
right.
know about it. I don't know what to do about it. I hope
It's
I'm
we're
with
not
you.
contribute to
I'm with
that.
you. Right, 100%. It's just it seems like a distraction. I mean, part of me though, I'm such a fighter for analog cause, natural cause, nature, and everything that aligns with nature's principles. So, just for me personally, it's such like I have kids at school age right now, so for a lot of people, it's an attack on the children right now, and it just seems like what is going to be enough to make us create the world where we're creating a fruitful place for an ability to do the best with your experience. Like you said, how free are we? I mean, that's so true. Look at our diet structure. I mean, that's really an underlying thing before any kind of vaccination are the things that we put in our body. We have, and that's in terms of thoughts, not just physical food. I mean, everything that we consume essentially. So it's a it's a difficult world to be able to honor and appreciate something like the thoughts of Steiner with so many distractions. I feel like we're so beat down though as kind of a population, as a mass consciousness right now, that when people do stumble across it, it's like a blessing. It's a true, it blows you away. It's in such a world of mundane, boring, things that are non-exciting, that they've pretty much made instant gratification everywhere without any kind of work ethic. I mean, everything's coming down. I mean, they're stripping away the doing part of the human, it feels like, and it feels like a battle, in a way, but at the same time, you don't want to get caught up in the battle. You just want to be actively creating, the creation that you came to bring. And I hear you, Dale.
I
It's
hear
not
you
very
too. I hear
fruitful.
you too, man.
Yep. So let's see here. What time? We're 11:34. Uh, let's
We,
let's wrap up because we got a little bit of divination at the end here. But some final thoughts here. I guess on Steiner's, some things we need to tie up. Brad or Ben and Todd, let me know if you guys have some additional things, and then Dale, if you still got some additional things. We still got another good
I
20 minutes or so here.
Yeah, sure. So I want to say a couple things real quick. First of all, Dale, I want to I have to send you a copy of my book. One of my things as an artist is to really push imagination, inspiration, and intuition, which is when I got into Steiner, and I was like, oh, this guy's literally saying the same thing. And my my art is like I'm always trying to get people to look a little deeper, and have an experience that can inspire them and maybe trigger inspiration and trigger intuition and definitely trigger imagination. And I guess I mean, we could maybe talk about this a little bit, but really, I think that's his big goal, is trying to restore imagination. Because when I talk to people, just daily, things, the imagination is extremely stifled, and it is because of technology. Because if you can't see it, then it doesn't exist almost. And when they encounter my art, I get a lot of people that they take a first glance and then they dig deeper and then they look and they're like, oh, I see all these things. And I'm like, exactly, like that's what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be imagining. You're supposed to be able to have that faculty. um so yeah, I don't know. Any thoughts on that, I guess?
Well, yeah, I'd love to see it, or yeah. And yeah, what you said, what we've been talking about, right? So I agree with all that. Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
um yeah, yeah, he I think between that and the way he just sort of conveys these ideas, where he'll have a lecture too where you may not, at first you may not understand what's happening, and it's literally because he's building all of that towards the end. And he says, this is why I've been explaining these things, and then it all comes together. Like, he's a master teacher. Like, there's a part of me that wonders if he isn't like the fourth incarnation of Hermes Trismegistus or something. Like, it's just, as someone who does teach young people, it's like I really look at him and I'm like, oh my gosh, like he's explaining everything so well, and it's so matter of fact, especially when you're talking the esoteric stuff. Yeah, I
I
don't know.
agree, Todd. I feel like I've always thought that too. Like, man, this I've seen a lot of humans. I've seen a lot of ways that people write, think, act, especially in the occult. And when Steiner hit me, it was just like, wow, what am I even gazing at right here? This isn't a normal incarnation right here. This is some serious power and authority coming through. And yeah, what do you think there, Dale? You think it's a I mean, I know you're not a speculator, but does he
Not,
ever
not
refer to
oh,
his own he
yeah,
he
not in the
actually
physical.
doesn't talk about his own past lives, does he?
Yeah. Well, he doesn't directly. But by the way, I'm not a speculator in the physical realm, but I'm a philosopher. I speculate about everything else.
Gotcha. Right.
That's my
Yeah,
job.
I
You know
feel
what I mean? I love to do that, but I don't on the physical level. I pretty much experts are what I look to. People that have taken 12 or 15 years of their life to study some subject. I listen to
true.
them. You know what I mean? I have to.
I
I
hear
don't have
you.
the time. I don't have the everything, kind of thing. But in the realm of so uh so in that sense, I don't know if that's too sensational to talk about, but Steiner, for instance, talks about if anybody ever comes up to you and says, I'm this person in my past life, or I'm that person in my past life, you've got problems. You've got
Right.
someone, in a certain sense, is trying to take your freedom away.
Mm-hmm.
There, because if you have to buy into that, you don't have you just don't have a relationship with the person in front of you anymore. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You're enthralled. That's probably the word, right? But Steiner would never ever do something like that.
Right.
On the other hand, it's quite dramatic as well. And I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to talk about the mystery of Golgotha. We were kind of working up to it, and we never did.
I
But that's
know it.
fine too. But what happened is he built this fantastic building. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of it, called the Goetheanum. He was also an architect. He was an architect for 22 buildings,
Wow.
and his work is very. You were talking about curves earlier,
Mm-hmm.
Ben, and yes, they're all curves. There's no right angles at all, which must have drove those poor guys nuts when they were building them. The first one was made entirely out of wood. It was about 10 stories high. It had two intersecting domes that sort of looked like from the side, like a pregnant woman kind of thing. It's one of the most beautiful buildings I've ever seen in my life. And it's called the Goetheanum,
Yeah, I pulled
named,
it up.
and
Amazing.
it was in Dornach, Switzerland, and it was burned down by arson on New Year's Eve of 1922-23.
That's awful.
And they left. Steiner was giving a lecture when it was actually starting to burn, but nobody knew it because of these inner double walls that it had. And really one of the great mystery centers brought back onto the earth by Steiner in that sense, right? So after that, it took a year. Steiner was kind of working with what to do. It's either 21 to 22 or 22 to 23. I might have my year wrong there. It was right on New Year's Eve, right when the years were changing. And up to that time, there'd also been a lot of conflict in the Anthroposophical Society of kind of a group of people that were encyclopedists who wanted to just mull over all the lecture cycles, and then the youth wanted to do something. They wanted to create something in the world. Maybe they didn't understand what Steiner was saying all in toto, but they wanted to do something. And he was really torn between those two, and actually started to side with the youth more so, which caused some issues. But in the end, and Steiner, by the way, had never been a member of the Anthroposophical Society. He was the teacher of the Anthroposophical movement. And then what grew up around that was a structure, a bureaucratic, you could call it structure, called the Anthroposophical Society itself. So it's important to know that was never true from 1912 until 1923, 24. And then after that burning, a year later, the next Christmas, there was a legendary Christmas conference that was a refounding of the General Anthroposophical Society, where Steiner karmically took on the presidency of that society. And during that time, he gave sets of lectures, one called Mystery Centers, Mystery something or other, where he talked about the ancient initiations of past mystery schools and how they were done. Okay. And then he also
check those out. That's cool.
Okay. And the other one he gave in the evening was called World History in the Light of Anthroposophy, where he talked about the evolution of humanity kind of through the life of memory. And there are some very fascinating things in there. I'll give you one tiny example. We find these odd little obelisks in certain places in the world, and we don't know why they're there or what they're for or what the heck was going on. But one of the points of view he shares is that at one time, humanity's memory was so connected to the earth and was not individuated that groups of people would set up these structures, and when people would encounter them, they would have memories that the earth had, that these obelisks would draw out of them.
That makes sense.
Wow.
How wild is
Like
that?
those standing memory nodes in time. That's so perfect.
And this also goes back to the Akasha Chronicle, right, which you've heard of, which is in a certain sense the memory life of the earth that an initiate eventually can access and actually experience the memory life of the earth, which is all about human will, which is all about the activity of the human being throughout history. That the earth is here for us. I mean, I don't mean that in any egotistical way at all. Okay. God knows we haven't done a good job with it. So there's this whole story that would take too long to talk about. But anyway, during that time, and years later, as people study these lecture cycles, they realized in those cycles that Steiner was describing a little bit of his past lives because of the people he would talk about and the way he talked about him. You could tell that he had been there. Okay. But he never directly mentions his past life. But I think he felt it important that people kind of know him because he was going to take on this karmic responsibility of becoming president of the society, which was more profound than we can imagine. Okay.
Right.
So, and also, by the way, earlier, when we were talking about these transformations in the etheric and the astral and stuff, I didn't bring the higher self into it, and I apologize for that. Somebody, when you were reading your wonderful reading there, that you mentioned the higher self, and of course, what is happening in all that work is that higher self that never really incarnates is beginning to incarnate, and this is really me talking now. I'm not absolutely positive Steiner says that. So that an initiate, to me, a full initiate, as Steiner was, is somebody whose reincarnating individuality has replaced Rudolf Steiner or replaced whoever. We can talk about the great initiates of the past, Zarathustra or whatever, right? So in those people, we have an actual full incarnation onto the physical realm during that lifetime, in my opinion. Okay.
So you have the one like wearing Rudolf Steiner as a suit, as a vessel, just to deliver them.
Okay. And you're right. I think that Steiner, people go, oh, we do these exercises and I'm not having any damn spiritual experiences. Do you guys know anybody that's got those? How come Steiner gave these and nobody's having these? Because, there aren't a lot of clairvoyants around, shall we say,
Right.
that we would trust. And I think it does go back. And I've talked about this a lot on the little anthroposophical study groups on Facebook, that we're talking about an extraordinary individual who fruited, who blossomed in that incarnation as Rudolf Steiner. And yes, he was able to give us these exercises, but hey, let's look at these things through lifetimes, not through one lifetime. That instant gratification you mentioned earlier, because everything you do with those exercises that bears fruit is an eternal fruit, I would argue. Okay. It carries over through your incarnations. Okay. It is not lost like so much of what we do, it would be, right? So,
Right.
yeah. So that, I just want to throw that out too. And also those awakenings awaken the organs of perception in your etheric body. And when they do, you perceive the etheric world directly. Okay. And in the astral body, when your astral body's organs of perception are awakened, which by the way are called the lotus flowers in the Eastern tradition, you will perceive, if you study his things, you will perceive. But again, this perceiving isn't a dead objectivity, shall we say, like we have on the physical plane with our physical sense organs. Our soul life is interacting in it. So there's still plenty of opportunity for distortion and illusion and delusion. Okay. So that again is always something that the initiate or the person in that process is always protecting themselves from. They're always wary. They're always checking. That's why it's called science, spiritual science. They're always replicating their experiences to be sure that what they're seeing is true. And as time goes on, their organism is even changing in such a way that they will see with what he calls time substance. As you were mentioning earlier, there's like a time substance that we create in these bodies that then is an organ of perception even unto itself, etc. So, okay, I'll stop there.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, man, wow, I'm blown
Would you
away.
say that the intuition, like you were talking about the nodes and the memories, would you say that intuition plays a part in, say, if there's a chance that a person that's incarnating could learn things to spread them? Do you think intuition would play a part to draw that person to these like old-timey memory chambers, like earthly memory chambers, as I guess as I could call them that?
Say more. I'm not sure I'm catching the picture.
Like you said that like these ancient religions, they would build nodes on the earth.
Okay,
and whenever someone would come in there, they would induce the memories of the earth. Like they would receive the memory that was built there, right?
Yes.
So would you say that in our present time, because some of these places, are still around, and like with the past life thing, you would see something and go, wow, this draws me to it. Would you say that intuition in turn could play a helping hand in drawing people to these places, because as history has cycles and repeats itself, there's obviously a time where we're going to go back to that? Would you say in this day and age that what some would call intuition now, whether it be the actual definition or not, would you say that helps pull certain egos to that place to give them the opportunity to make that decision?
That's actually very complicated, but I'll say this: generally speaking, Steiner is describing this whole thing, which we haven't really discussed. Another fundamental picture from Steiner is this notion of the evolution of consciousness itself, right? Which we saw a little bit of in the development of the child, through the developmental stages. But here's the irony: in our time, evolution is more or less a fact. We've got fossils, we've got fairly clear pictures imaginatively of the unfolding of the earthly evolution of the earth. But somebody comes along and says, and evolution, consciousness is massively evolved over time. And they look at you like, what? No. Consciousness has been exactly the same 5,000 years ago as it is now. All they had were physical sense perceptions and a really lousy brain thinking. And they came up with what they came up with. But we're really smart now. Right?
It's hard to say that without laughing.
Oh, no, he's saying in the past, those etheric organs of perception, they were open. They were seeing the etheric world. They were seeing the astral world all the time, but there was no individuality there because they were filled with spiritual experience and the presence of spiritual beings. So they weren't persons. They were like in a hive. kind of. This is my
Mhm.
they
I
they
like
lived
that.
in wisdom. They built pyramids and everything, but personally they weren't involved. Bizarre as that sounds, I know, right? So that
Right.
happened was all those organs of perception that access the spiritual world, the etheric world, the astral world, they had to be damped down and become dormant so that we would separate from the spiritual world. And in
Mhm.
separating, in the agony, in the sorrow, in the passion of our passion, which the Christ paints so beautifully and horrifyingly
Mhm.
too, right? We now stand alone on the earth and make the decision: are we going to love out of our freedom? Right?
Mhm.
Love. You know, we loved before, but it was just poured into us by the higher world. So big deal.
Right.
But are we going to do it? And this is the great design, as kind of heartless as the dark side of it is, shall we say, right? It's anyway, that's my picture of it, really. I mean, I don't know how much of that is pure Steiner. I know it's some Steiner, but so so my point being that we're not really returning to atavistic forms of that consciousness in terms of these obelisks and Stonehenges and whatever they might be, right? I'm not saying Stonehenge is one of them, but yet what you say in the individuality of one person's destiny, yes, absolutely, it could be that an individual has a karmic destiny and need to revisit these sites for the purposes of their development, for the purposes of karma from their past, right? There's no way you can generalize that, right? That's far more individual than the individual you are or the individual I am. The individuality of your karma is really individual. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Right.
Yes, yep, yeah, that's
There's no
funny.
way
I like that.
anything's good or bad there. It could absolutely be that somebody meets a massive destiny moment by encountering one of those things. Now, whether they would consciously have the memories that those people had naturally in that form of consciousness in its time, that's another question. I wouldn't have any way to know that. Yeah.
Right.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. That answers my question pretty beautifully.
Dude,
I see.
you channel him. You're like a channel for him, I'm pretty sure.
Well, you know what, guys? The thing that you're finding is I'm trying to play catch up in our world because we mentioned it right at the beginning of the talk, and that is that all our language sucks.
Yeah.
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 So we talk about the human body. Well, the human body is not this physical stack of various refuse. You know what I mean? It's just not that.
More
That
than
it's
that.
with the etheric and the astral and the ego in order for us to have any conversation really about the spiritual, in my opinion, at all. If that framework is not there, we lose a certain clarity, and we start kind of
Mhm.
spinning off into really what it amounts to is metaphysics, which I
Right.
don't I don't have a love for. Metaphysics is just physical body
Fantasy.
action and trying to extrapolate the spiritual, but all you have for your images are images from the physical world. So what you get is
Mhm.
spiritual materialism.
Yep.
But most, I'm going to say a lot of spiritual movements are just spiritual materialism. Steiner really challenges you. He says, no, no, the etheric is like this, the astral is like this. You don't really know what they are until you have those organs of perception opened up and you yourself have direct experience. Then we can start
Right.
talking about this world. See what I mean? And so,
Yeah.
what
Because
he
it's
has to
work.
do is just
It's a
pour out all
spiritual
the
work.
lectures, right?
Right.
Pour all this stuff out to show you, yeah, you don't get it, man. And yet we just love it. We just love the abstraction, man. We love just extrapolating out into this stuff, and we're
Mhm.
kind of in that world, right? I don't know. I don't want to belittle anything either, but so that's why I spend so much time giving you a backstory before I finally try to answer a question. That's what I'm
Right.
doing.
It's all
Which,
good.
Every single question has been that, right?
We
Oh
need
yes.
that
yeah.
though. We need the con. We have so much text without any con,
Yes. Amen.
and that's where we're at these days.
Absolutely.
This is what I was telling Dale before the show, Barry, but like one of our objectives with this show is improving language and bringing more awareness to how our current Western language is hyper polluted, and just saying a simple word like spiritual, that's going to be interpreted in so many ways, and
Right.
it's risky almost communicating. Which I do want to talk about this briefly. Is like uh, we've talked about a language, Dale, called AUI, or something, and it's a
Ooh,
language
yeah, yeah.
derived by a doctor. I forget his name right now, but it's all about simplifying language and removing the abstraction. And when I then learned about eurythmy, I was like, this guy already did it 100 years ago, and he did it in a way that's truly beautiful. And I want to learn. I downloaded or got some videos, eurythmy exercises, and it's like it's so amazing to me.
It absolutely is. Sorry, I forgot to mention that.
No, you're totally
Uh,
good.
we would go every Saturday to an hour of eurythmy with a eurythmy teacher. I got to tell you, man, if you
Oh,
can find it, it's a revelation. It's a revelation. Visible speech, visible music through the human
Yeah,
body. Yeah.
that's right.
Uh, so Dale, I wanted to just add here because I have to go pretty soon. But you're like the Christian like creed like brought up. I kind of took a little bit out of that. How you said you like Steiner's view on that. Lately, I've been asking for help, and I recently moved to Quakertown, PA. It's a funny story. But you were talking about the schools for Steiner's schools and the Waldorf school, right? And
Yeah.
for a while, I've been feeling a pull to like get out of where I'm at because I felt stuck and I knew I needed to do something. So I moved to this town, Quakertown. My girlfriend's going to Lehigh University, and the architecture there is great. And I felt like I was supposed to be there. So this weekend, I was like, hey, like, what's the next step? I just kept asking myself, like, what's the next step? Like, I'm here. What's the next step? So I wake up this morning and I see that Steiner's on here, which I haven't really delved into deeply, but I know that there's context on the front. And it's funny because there's like two schools, I think, right around Quakertown. There's actually a Waldorf school, River Valley Waldorf school, like 15 miles away. So to me, it's funny. And it was like an ask and you shall receive kind of thing. And I just wanted to express my gratitude to everyone here, and, especially, Todd and Barry for setting this up, and then you for coming on here and giving your expertise in a certain subject. As in my opinion, all the roads lead to Rome. If you want to go that way, but yeah, I just wanted to say thanks.
You're welcome. And by the way, check things out there because there are spin-offs there. There could possibly be a study group. They may have a Saturday eurythmy for people. All these kinds of things flower out of a Waldorf school that you don't necessarily have to be at the Waldorf school to appreciate and engage in. So check that out
Mhm.
over there. They may have a lot of that stuff there. And you're
Definitely,
still very
definitely.
welcome. And blessings to you, sir.
Blessings to you too, and I'm definitely going to plan on checking that out. I think that's the next step.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting involved, just yeah, and Steiner's a big doer, and that's what it's all about is facing your own, searching for those eternal, prizes and things to hold on to is so important because this is where you do the work, this is where you do the movement, this is where you shift things around, this is where you're allowed to adjust things, this is where you create. So I mean, this is your seed movement. You're aligning your blueprint. So things that, you don't want to experience when you ascend to these spiritual thrones of your own places that you've built, you want a seed that's gonna, be fruitful in things that you'd like to obtain, eternally, and overcoming, certain patterns and desires, having an execution of will, having control over the realm of thought. These are all things obtainable here, things that as humans we ought to, play with and experience and be able to overcome, and not have these things be our identity in themselves. And, let these be tools that, we come to use and we come to color things with. And I just love it how, that's really a big separation of Steiner versus a lot of the other teachers was the act of doing, the act of constant reflection, constant self work, those big eternal things that you're trying to hold, and the more work that you can get done, you know right now it's just so exponential to your past and future and your ultimate being of yourself. So I think it's it's big, it's important for these times in such a fleeting world of non-eternal aspects and complete spiritual materialism. I mean, it's a how are you going to build something of the all from just a 3% little piece of it that you're calling the all? I mean, you're it's like you're building this sandcastle on this stone of eternity, that keeps getting washed away by the eternal waves. And pick something here that's eternal. Look at the patterns. Discover these eternal. Know that you can never build a triangle with more than 180 degrees. I mean, just come to know some simple eternal things. And really, it's going to be about the moral aspect, I think, here is the ultimate prize. Once you conquer the moral realms and you have intent in your heart to really, it all starts with that moral compass. I mean, so having a good tackle and stronghold and having that realm tamed at your side ready to work is very much the importance of here. It's represented as Pluto, as the transformer, as the destroyer. And it's very much a beautiful energy that is eternal, that's constantly recreating from its own puzzle pieces. So yeah, Dale, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, really, really would, at some point in the future, check in with you again. I mean, we got so much we can dive into with you. It's incredible. And I love giving you a space too. I'm sure you have plenty of space in other avenues, but giving you a space to have a little bit more freedom and confidence in whatever you'd like to say egoically, with your fire. It's a safe place to do that here. There's no judgment, so.
It is. It's
Um,
wonderful. Very nice.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you all.
Todd, do you want to get into, we got about a half hour here or so. Do you want to do a little bit of divination? And Dale, you're welcome to stay, hang out. I don't know how you feel about those things, but if you've got something you've won a poll, I mean, absolutely join in here. So, yeah.
Do you do tarot or anything like that, Dale?
Maybe I did some I Ching years ago, but generally
Oh.
don't so much anymore. Yeah.
Oh, that's
Okay.
cool.
Awesome.
Nice.
Awesome.
Well,
Well,
you're
Todd, you want to
say,
start us
yeah.
off, buddy?
Well, okay, yeah. So like I say, you're welcome to totally chime in. We just kind of
Yes.
talk about things and share things, I guess, is the best way to put it. I want to share. So have you ever heard of the card game called Magic the Gathering by chance?
I have not.
All right. So on our show, I like to share these. This is a card game that actually started, oh man, maybe 20, I don't know if they're going on 30 years, but it's pretty old. It came out, I think,
In the
early
90s.
in the 90s, yeah, so pushing 30 almost. It's a card game. You get a deck of cards, about 60 cards, and there's 5 colors. Now, and I personally think Steiner would actually find humor in this type of thing, but there's 5 colors: white, green, red, black, and blue. And the cards eventually have different functions where you have like a creature card, you'll have a spell card, and the main thing you have is a resource card, which is usually called a land. And those resources pay for your spells. And I like to share some of the cards on here just because I find them very, I don't know, I guess intriguing. And so today,
Meaningful. Yeah.
yeah, and meaningful and just fun too. And you'll see why I wanted to share this card with you, Barry. So this is a card that's super old. It came out as one of the first cards in the first series. And it's called Wrath of God. And Barry, like I say, you will appreciate this because it's got your name in it.
Awesome.
So this is the old card. This is called Wrath of God, and the effect of the card is to bury all creatures, i.e., destroy all creatures, and they cannot come back. So they're done.
Awesome.
You don't get the. This is what we would call a board clear. So if you have a whole bunch of creatures on the table to be played, they are all destroyed.
Wow, it seems like a pretty awesome one to have in your stack.
Absolutely, it's a very powerful card. I mean, so the game often revolves around playing creatures, and you then use those creatures to attack the opponent. The opponent has 20 life, and each time you get attacked and take the damage, you subtract from that life. So this is kind of it's just to be 100. The really interesting aspect is the art and the idea of this card. And there's a really great quote on this one. They put like flavor text on it, and it's called. This one's by William Shakespeare. As flies to wanton boys are we to the gods. They kill us for their sport. That's from King Lear. A fun share for that today.
I love it. A lot of the times it feels like this trait right here, I don't know, I feel like a representative of it in a way. Um, and I try to be more of a like a right hand of God approach, but now where I'm at now, I'm just ever evolving towards that center of balance. But I mean, I have deep respect for a play like this. I think about I often have imagination and fantasies, where a move like this needs to be played in the act of creation. So, in order to have a perfectly germ-free environment where you're going to make something pure, it would start with a clean slate or a wipe per se.
Yep.
And there's many ways to, I guess, accomplish something like that. You have, obviously fire, water, or, petrification. There's so many different ways you could just wipe everything when you're a all powerful anything on your plate in order to choose from being. And yeah, man, it's a deep, with great power comes great responsibility. So to wield something like this and to have this in your reservoir as a true being, you would have to have almost the biggest height of a moral nature. You'd be trusted with great power, and it feels like there's only one that could hold that. There couldn't be two beings out there that could have access to the wipe. It feels like whatever brought it into existence can bring it out of existence, and in a sense, whatever oneness is, I suppose it would lie in its hands, whether that's something we can access or not individually, whether we'd even want to, or, play with something like that. I don't know, but
It's
we
definitely
do this. We have it in our own worlds too. Like, think of where you could act a certain way, or you could say a certain thing that could totally just wipe your environment. I mean,
oh
I've
yeah.
personally done it probably in a couple different ways, and you might not even know you're doing it. You could plant a seed in somebody's environment that you didn't see what it grew into. Like, you could have said one thing a while ago in a relationship that just created a seed, and it started getting nurtured and it started growing and it grew into this situation that you didn't see coming, and you started having all these other things to explain it when it was just this little ripple way back yonder.
Right.
So I mean, the wrath of God can be a very innocent tiny little speck, much as a tidal wave or a plasma burst or something into our system. I mean, I love playing with those types of imaginations. I don't know how healthy that is for my mind and my thrones and where I could go and what, but I mean, I'm always just flying around on dragons and, being a protector spirit, just
Well,
making sure everything is provided for. It has everything it needs for its experience. So if this is a realm with food, make sure you got food, or whatever you need to do to live in your consciousness, your realm of consciousness. I don't know, being a provider is something that I feel like is the true nature of God. It's like that silent, it doesn't need to speak up. It's just always providing for, always there for support. It's really your sense of perfection, and it's everything, and that's why it's okay to sit in imperfection, and why it's a humble position of grace and adornment. And it's good to have you never want to take away your father, you never want to think you're perfect, and take that away, because everybody needs a dad. I mean, I guess you could be the parentless parent, but whew, I mean, that's a lot of energy to hold right there,
It's funny you say
Yeah.
that it's such a powerful card because in Converse, if you remember that one spell I showed, the counter spell, that literally, if you were to play a Wrath of God and your opponent were to play a counter spell, you wouldn't get to play Wrath of God. It's a very dynamic game.
Right. I'm gonna pull. Well, I'm getting I like the animal cards here, so I'm gonna shuffle shuffle these up. And you picked the dolphin this week. Yeah, Amy just said she got the dolphin, which we were talking about. I think the dolphin on the last show, so that's kind of funny.
Oh
And that's
yeah.
the 40 card. And I don't know where it was. Oh yeah, 40 came up right now in this episode where Steiner had, those events happen at age 40, when he pretty much had the Christ miracle event in his own experience there, I think is,
Yep.
yeah. 40 is, it's got four something, and D is through, D is delta. It's the aspect of a trinity. It's a rising sun. So, if 40, just the sound of it alone has a lot of meaning in it. It's
I'll mention Steiner said that a teacher would never appear who was going to be a spiritual teacher until they were 40 years old.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So,
That's pretty
we've got
awesome.
younger people than that now, but I got nothing to say about it. But he was 40 when he began his teaching, as it were. Anyway, sorry
Wow.
for interrupting.
No, you're perfectly good.
Okay.
That's pretty awesome. That's awesome there. Yeah, you're definitely not interrupting, Dale. Okay, let me see here. Just gonna keep shuffling a little bit, and all right. So I'm gonna ask a question here, and the question's gonna be, once again, we're using the animal cards, so we can kind of relate this to Steiner. We can relate this to our animal body, our pretty much our organs of sense, sentient, awareness. It also represents the zodiac, the movements, and it's really the faces. If you have a pole, you have a center position in time, and then you have, essentially, you're going to break down the movement of the turn, revolution, or facing into 12 different spheres, which is essentially ruled by Jupiter, as Jupiter takes 1 year to go through the zodiac, all the signs there, and that 12 aligns with the measurement of man, the sine wave, the coloring of the particle that is the 13 in the center. So whenever I do the animal cards here, I really like looking at the 12, the zodiac, the movement, definitely that astral nature, that desire nature, that nature that gets you to move. And, essentially you have to have a desire, some kind of desire in there, in order to cause that initial movement. So you get the thought, the inspiration, and then you get this feeling or this desire to move it into action, to bring it into this creative experience here. So with this movement card, maybe we can get shown here. What kind of movements are we looking at right now? What kind of desires are we looking at? What's coming in? We're hitting a tropical, almost Virgo energy, and we're hitting Cancer, sidereal energy on the moon forces. So, we've got Leo pretty much going right in between, coming up on the sidereal right there, first degree of Leo. So just show us right now maybe what kind of movements are going to be associated with our experience. Nice. So pulled the 11 card, the moose. Yep. And if you can look up the moose card for me, Todd, real quick, and just throw up a quick image, because it'll just get me all robot-y if I try to download it.
Yeah, it's
Um, Yeah, so the moose is very interesting. I do have a book and it gives like a page reading on it, but let's just take a look at it in general here with what's coming through. So the moose is a very, first of all, aware being, and it's very big in its area of sound, its sense of sound. It can hear very well. And it's always in very quiet environments, it seems, like a nice, swamp or a body of water that's absorbing sound. So it's able to, it's sitting in an area that sounds are just getting absorbed into. So I see the moose as hearing, a big focus on what's heard, and that also would align with the moon. Our moon force is going into fixed fire Leo coming up right now on the sidereal area. That would align with that. That fifth house, and the fifth house is representative of things heard. So once again, another hearing kind of relation here. So it's neat if we think about the nature of movement and we think about hearing. Um, that's in itself going to be in the world of sound, almost the first action. That's why the 7 pieces that you read, Ben, it started with that first one was, hearing something, and then the second one was it was the twinkling stars. So it was after you heard something, it started to get focused, and then it started to come in a little bit more and get louder and louder. So, and then also we have the moose as well, that it's very protective of its young. So, we're looking at a time like I was talking about earlier with my kids in school, and just kind of some of the things that are going on in the movements around me that aren't the most comfortable energy for me and for a lot of other people out there. There's a big maybe protecting of the young feeling kind of in the air, kind of movements towards that right now. So also, I see a very deep northern animal, tied to, the as you go more north, you're working more towards the very earth center of our system. You're looking at the polaric energy that comes in, and you're looking at a very clean, crisp energy that is essentially coolness or coldness from the eternal heat of the day. And as the mountaintop, as the snow trickles down, it's kind of where life starts. So I see the moose almost as a representative in a body of woods, as something it takes a big system all working together to get to the moose. If we were talking about the organ system, the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, and the animal kingdom, all building on top of one another, by the time you get a moose in a particular environment, you're looking at, in our world now, pretty rare environment. It takes a very quiet area in order to get a moose to appear in order to have it manifest in. So we're losing a lot of our quietness and a lot of our voids and a lot of our areas of stillness where we can hear and where we can listen. So let's just try to maybe protect those areas and see this as a card there where we can appreciate silence and listening. So and I'm sure Steiner was, if you think of somebody who gave out everything that came through him, that's somebody who knows how to listen right there. Absolutely.
Yeah, I just listened to a video where he pretty much talks about the importance of listening, and like how you basically, I remember clicking, it was like you can't even begin to be a teacher if you can't listen, something along those lines.
Right. It makes sense. I mean, what are you doing if you're not starting with listening? You're not, I don't know, teaching this word in itself, but sharing, or like, how do you share something if it was, because when you share, or when you bring something through, it was never yours. I'm pretty sure if you got Steiner in a room and you were talking with him, I mean, maybe he wouldn't necessarily claim any of these truths as his own. I don't think he would claim these as something that are eternally shared for everything. It's something that isn't there. You can't associate possession with it, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, think of what other people have said. Yeah, gosh, I read this and now I hear it in Steiner. Eternal truth is eternal truth, right? But
Right.
in each stage of the evolution of consciousness, the language and the conceptual frameworks that it can be shaped into are going to change.
Right.
And here's the coolest thing. In our time, with science, Steiner says it was really when science really took hold that then the soul could be formed in such a way that when it entered into the spiritual world, it could attain to an objectivity in relation to it that was never possible before. However problematic science as such can be seen, right? And so he sees that as was a profound moment in human history when now the human being can really enter into the spiritual world in a free way. And I think I hope that's not distracting from.
No,
from
it's not.
Doing. Yeah. There's a couple of things about construction and stuff, but we can someday talk about that perhaps.
Dude, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah.
My wife is calling me, by the way, and I just wanted to be able to thank you all so very, very much for letting me be on with you and sharing things. And I'm loving what you guys are doing right now, and I wish I could stay on, but I do need to go if that's
Dale,
okay.
it's been a real pleasure, absolutely, and we'll be in contact. And we everybody appreciates you so much taking time out of your life to do this. Go get with that family, go do what you got to do, and we'll talk in the future, Dale. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Blessings to all of you. Take care.
Blessings to you, Dale. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, let me see here. So Todd, I pulled the same rune again this week. I swear I was in there shuffling them around and I landed the self rune, which is man, the human race, the self. It's got the 2 bars with the X in between it. The actual name of the rune is the Manes. So once again, man, Manes, mana, the self. The starting point is the self. And it just shows that, that clarity, the willingness to change is the ability to listen. So being open, you can't hear anything if you're shut down and you already have formed ideas sitting there. So if you've already got it all figured out, you're not being a good listener. You're not being very open. You need to constantly keep all your categories that you think you've figured out 100% open and flexible and allow them to change if something better approaches it. And if you got something better, I want in on it. I mean, that's all of us should always be trying to constantly evaluate our situation with doubt. And doubt is a very strong tool because you're going to arrive at places that you can't break through. Like death, for example. I just don't believe in death. I don't think anything can die. So I think energy can only transmute. So that's something that my doubt, I've picked apart death so hard that I don't see it as something real to me anymore. I know that it's a human concept and it's not a actual real tangible thing out there. So the human tool of doubt has given me a nice tool to arrive at spiritual objectivity instead of spiritual materialism. So it's just
that's really cool you mentioned doubt, because Terence McKenna does a great bit about the I think it's Timothy the Doubter, who
okay
you have to forgive me because it's been a while since I recall this story, so I'll try to paraphrase. But essentially, Timothy the Doubter was the only one. I don't remember if Jesus. I think this is after he was crucified, but he comes back and he's like, "Hey, dudes, what's up?" And everyone's in awe, but Timothy the Doubter was the only one who shared doubt with Jesus and asked to touch the wound, which he did, and therefore able to. In a way, because I think typically doubt is seen as a negative thing, and it probably is used negatively more. I think it's I think it's a precursor for a lot of people to jump into the devil's advocate seat, which is always useless, just so you know. But it's still, in that regard, in that story, though, he had the courage to express his doubt and thus gain knowledge, and is the only one, I think, if I remember correctly, that was able to do so and touch the wound of the Christ. So very fascinating.
That's cool. Yeah, I've used it as a personal tool to rip through everything. Even as a little kid, when they told me in church that, God hates, this one or that one, I was just like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Right.
I doubt God hates. I mean, we're already getting off into like on the second word right there. You just told me something that's, and what feels correct. If, in my idea, this eternal aspect of fire is an aspect of love. So you're going to tell me that love hates. How can something be its opposite? I mean, obviously a pole would work that out and you'd have a head and a foot, but at the same time, they're not the same. So, I mean, it's the love doesn't hate because the love isn't the hate isn't the love. Those are just two opposite sides of the circle right there. And so, yeah, I mean, doubt right away got me probably in trouble. But I mean,
Same. Yeah.
yeah, so as a kid, I just went right down this path of nothing this place is telling me is obviously true. I'd go into the woods and I'd realize nobody can tell me what's going on in here. Like, look
Right.
at what all you beings are getting into. I mean, look at all this incredible growth and expansion, and this tiny little acorn grew into this 20-ton oak tree. I mean, all of these, how did this, no one was explaining any of that. So I knew that there was this whole other paradigm out there. And then I knew that this world, I was going to have to go through it, go through the darkness. I couldn't just avoid it, so I had to eat it all, bury it all, bury sine waves, and
Bury all creatures.
ingest it all, give my gallbladder some training, and let Saturn, Pluto drip acid on the stuff that my body couldn't digest, and to keep me nice and clear and pure with a nice solar plexus in there, and then my gut mind, my heart mind, and my mind mind, or whatever, the brain mind, all just kind of start joining as one circle there, and we'll get there, man. It's quite the, yeah, I mean, it's doubt is it's all, they're all tools. I mean, all of them, even like faith and charity, and I want to get bigger into more servantry, what it is to be a true servant. I think ultimately we're all going to see from that perspective, like our generations, this gap of beings that are here in these times are here of servant of being asked to come help. And I think cosmically, we're servants, we're beings of, we're the only ones that stayed back to just keep listening to the original instruction set, and we never lost that ability. So I don't think it ever loses you. You can go into any system and you're connected to its original settings through the original patterns that are there that you still listen to. And it's not like they're gone for people. I think everything can be overcome, and it's always going to be there if you work down to it and get rid of the crap that's sitting on top. Just like my story of my neck journey. I'm ripping away all the Leviathan chains, all these human desires and emotions, and all these electrical magnetic groundings that are blocking and overtaking the corpus callosum and blocking the oil chambers and inside me, and they're spiking into it and they're eating it up. So it's my duty to rip all that shit away and to make it free and to allow it to just flow freely and to not be consumed by these demons and desires and all these things coming in that are foreign to me. I'm going to feed off that personally, not something else.
It's great you mentioned that because I have a new deck to share with everybody.
Ooh, what you got?
It's interesting you mentioned the I don't know, you just mentioned something about opposition, but that's exactly what we're going to do here. So I shared with you guys the Wrath of God card. I want to share with you guys this deck my friend made. Switch the camera. So this is a deck called 81 Daemons, however you want to pronounce it.
Okay.
It's by my friend Michael Leah. He runs Art Love Collective, and he's a really talented artist and runs a studio, and he designed this deck, and he shared it with me and asked me to sort of try to find a way to use it for interpretation.
Okay.
And the cards are called, like I said, 81 Daemons. So there's 81 cards, and he's half Japanese, so he has a. In Japan, they're very. I don't know how you put it. They talk about demons like it's not like a weird thing here, and they have physical aspects that are translated here, and that's how they sort of talk about them.
Okay.
So I don't know. These aren't specifically the demons, but it's sort of his interpretation. And I think what I'll do
That's
is
important too, because the opposition, the nature of opposition, gives you knowledge of the whole entire thing. Because if you know it's something's opposite, you know obviously the opposite of the opposite is the thing, and you also know the cycle. So if you know where its opposite point is on the circle, you
right.
can know all of its areas around how it's going to act, pretty much. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I like that.
I like to describe it too is so like when you get the spades, that's going to be their swords, and that's supposed to be a 180-degree angle. And there's several ways to look at it. The way I kind of like to describe it is you can think of a circle, you divide it in half. Now you have your two opposing points. Now you can waver from side to side, but you're always going to be fluctuating on your balance. And then, or you can
That's right.
be
And
look
that's Saturn. That's the opposition. The D right through the middle, the 180, the
right.
air, that
Yeah.
straight line,
So you
and
can
the
be the
fire.
guy looking down the barrel, right? Looking exactly at what your opposition is or the challenge that you need to examine, or you can be sort of slicing it through a sphere, right? And then it's sort of a
Mhm.
where are you on the wave type thing, or what is your angle? And obviously our goal is the 180, and you should you got to be careful with it for sure. So that's communication.
Right. And
Um,
if you think about those 180s, you pretty much get, that's how you make essentially everything. That's the straight line, right? So you've got opposite that. There's only the straight and the curved, essentially the arc line and the straight line. So you've got pretty much a triangle, the rising, culmination, and setting, that triangle. Those are all straight lines up there. So it's showing you that earth, air, fire triangle. Those are all aspects of straightness. And then you've got the fourth, which is the water. It's all curved. So then that's why the wheel goes first to fourth being Cancer sitting on the bottom. That's the wave, the water, and that's why water always seeks its level, why it always heads down, always looking for that balance point. So it shows you that inertia, that wave, like you were just saying, it's like a separation of the curve versus the straight. That's really interesting. I like this so far.
Great. So I'm
Yeah,
gonna do two cards, and we're just gonna look because I don't have the quote unquote correct spread yet, but I think we'll just do two
sure.
cards in awareness for your futures and whatnot.
Do a top and a bottom, kind of.
Yeah, we can do top bottom. So we have the Wrath of
Okay.
God, and now we're gonna take a look at the demons. So let's see what we get. Oh wow, that's so. Oh my goodness. All right, let me get a picture
I
for
love
you
it.
guys.
Okay.
Amazing cards. So our top card, we got Buddha, which is number
Awesome.
79, and our bottom card we got 18, which is Deceit.
Wow.
And the picture will be
Wow.
up in just a second.
Wow, what a neat. So 79 Buddha gold, right? So I see a big, and these are all the demons, remember, right? So we've got, and then which the gold, the sun, that would be tied to life, which is tied to 18, but it's showing you deceit right there.
On the bottom
Ooh.
too, underlying story. So be careful.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe the gold, the Buddha, and I see almost as the Mercury, the enlightened Mercury, as gold in a way right there, as the 79. And you've got, and it's showing you this is the top, so this is the true face you ought to have, and then the back, the where you come from. You came from deceit, you came through the darkness, you came through the 18, you came through life, right? 8 is the past tense of eat. Teen, you've been eating teenager. That's pretty
Oh
much the
God.
story right there. I mean, that's pretty deceitful if you ask me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, 18, we're told it's life. It means life in a lot of different ways, especially in the crystal language book there. And, he really breaks it down to show either an attack or a growth in life every time they're using that number. It's really been associated with what they're calling life in our realm. However, if this is truly deceit, from a grander perspective, this isn't life. It's showing you that real life is probably that 79, that gold, because essentially from our seat here in the 18 and the deceit, which is neat because we're on episode 19, so we're in the center of the 18, so we can see the 18 clearly at this point. The 18 is the field around us, the gold around us. We can see it. So we've got in our realm, in the realm of the 18, gold is the only thing essentially eternal. It doesn't need to be polished. It always shines. I mean, it's it does, you can throw any element, any situation, any depth, any pressure, and it's just gold still. It remains itself. So it doesn't shift. It doesn't change. It's eternal. And that would be the 79, right? Element 79, Buddha. So maybe not all demons are bad, but this is a neat, these are all opposition cards in a way too, and these are very two almost opposites of each other.
Right.
What do we get when we do 79 and 18? We get 97. And 90 degrees, sever, 90 degrees sever, you're a quarter horse, take off a chunk. That's 1/4, which would be a certain direction on the north, south, east, west. Or it would also be the 1 and the 4 being the pyramidal 5, the pole extending up from the center of the 4, which is the 5th or the quintessence, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
But yeah, I'm going to see the artwork here. Oh, deceit. Check that out. So there's 18. And look at the colors. It's gray. It's black and white kind of mixed right there.
There's like no
We've got,
eyes too, which is interesting. It's like
right,
no form, and it's sort of it's almost like
horns.
your back's to the thing, to your back's to the
Yeah.
reality of it.
Yeah. And I like how you've got the cube with like almost it's like you're in ice, like crystallized ice, frozen, and your light traveling through it, hoping to not get, I guess, stuck in the cube, right?
Mm.
And then what do we have on 79? It almost looks like the same ice, the same figure tilted, now becoming a mountain with the sun around it as the symbol of gold, and creating a field around the mountain. So real life, like bringing a electromagnetic field because you arranged your matter instead of chaos, which deceit looks like, unarranged chaos. You arrange it all into a mountain, a center point, a focal point, which creates a field, and all of a sudden you can see your being. And you're on the same spiked crystal ice platform right there too. And maybe instead of ice water, we get silica, straight lines, and the power, from the release of the power that the nature of silica holds. Not sure how that would, I mean, gold and crystal, if that would be a good relation, because quartz, silica, you always find that with gold pretty much. They're symbiotic of each other.
Mm.
And this would really show the warming and the melting of the ice, the melting of the chaos. So you would pretty much God wrath it, nuke bomb it, and then you would get this big center point of a focal point. And at that point in time, you would have the center point, the symbol of the sun. We have a point with a circle around it. The circle around it is the silver lining, is the moon that goes around the center point, which is the sun. So the male aspect in the center, it's a focalized point, it's logos, it's arrangement, and it's below. So you've got a trumpet like, making noise from below. And the outer ring is the moon forces, and those are things that are soma, that lift up, and that's movement. The one in the center, the gold, there's only pretty much everything reflects off of that. So everything's moving around it as the gold. So yeah, man, beautiful cards.
It's funny because Steiner says I didn't go deep on the crystal video, but in the one he talks about crystals a bit, and he talks about silica quartz being ancient. It's like the oldest aspect of Earth. And I was thinking
Yep.
about it. I'm like, well, it's just solid crystal, literally like water. It's solid water in its
Yep.
state, right? And it's like, oh, okay, you could see how.
And it takes so long because it's constantly cleansing and then putting a new layer on. It takes that layer away, gets rid of the impurities, puts a new layer on, becoming clearer and clearer through time.
Right.
That's why when you find a crystal point or something, the tip of it is the clearest spot because that was the original beginning and it's been constantly redoing its phases through time. And that's why right now you're still living in a time where any kind of antique crystal ball that somebody had in their family that was a real piece of crystal from this earth that was that clear that somebody polished into a ball, that is a very high valued item in terms of actual objects on this plane. The larger, the clearer, that's an original, those are eons and eons and eons of light formation. I mean, that's incredible. So, and I think that's what our Crystal ball system is. So that's how you see the future with a crystal ball. So a crystal ball, I have one that I got from an antique, I guess, house estate sale thing. It's a 6-inch ball. I take this thing outside and it makes a mini sun, like a mini system pretty much. So whenever our sun obviously is shining, and even if the sun isn't shining, it's behind clouds, I still get the object of a sun appearing. Like there's some kind of background rays penetrating everything and still making this electric object appear, this circle.
Right.
So
wow.
I mean, crystals are very interesting. Our entire freaking system runs on them right now with, all of our electronics and stuff. They're all using crystal technology.
Right.
And Bill Gates is after, Arkansas, which is where the diamond fields are. So you're getting super hardened quartz clear crystal. I mean, they've built all their CERN things on crystal silica backbone mountain ranges in Italy and in California. They call it the Silica Valley. So silica is a transformer and transmitter. It's a receiver of information and it's a store of information. So they know whoever's fucking up our shit right now knows all that.
Right.
And they're using that system to keep us in a time feedback loop, I think. And we're going to bust out of it though, man.
Yeah, it's already happening.
Jailbreak it.
Easy. Come on. Give me a real challenge, please. Anyways.
Right. Great show, Todd. Really appreciate it, man.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dale. If you do tune in to listen to this, thank you so much for joining us. I really hope we can have him back on. We could definitely talk for hours upon hours.
Too, man.
Oh yeah, no problem, man. I just had a little bit of a call in to come in here. I came back out to get some stuff and spend some time for my grandparents' anniversary. So I was sitting there, and then all of a sudden I saw your post on the Steiner on Facebook, and I was like, heck
yeah, man. Heck yeah, dude. It's big. I hope we can get him back on too. That'd be great. I mean,
right, yeah, we could definitely talk more. We do have to.
We'll give him a couple months at least.
Funny story. I've been trying to figure out the mystery of gold. Well, not figure out, but learn more about it myself. And every time I watch a video, I'm like, I still am not there yet. And it's like our conversations. So like, we'll get there. Don't worry.
We'll get there. It's a big one.
Everything in its time.
It's a big one.
As people start learning this stuff and feeding it into our field, though, we'll be able to get a better picture.
It'll be a quicker feedback loop for ourselves. I think so too. The more awareness we can bring to it. Yep. Absolutely. Well, you want to do it again? Do it again next week, episode 20, 19. It's great, man.
It's going to be an evening show, I think. I have an event in the morning, but I should be done. If we can aim for 6 or 6:37, something like that would be ideal.
Sweet.
But otherwise,
sounds great.
Awesome.
Sounds great, Don. Well, I'm going to go do a run, eat some food, and get on with the rest of this Sunday here. You guys both have an awesome rest of your Sunday.
You do the same. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Really appreciate you guys. Definitely definitely see you next week. Stay
Absolutely.
stay safe and have an